Yo, Atlas speaking and welcome to part 9 of What If I Was Reborn in Attack on Titan as a civilian nobody with the gamer system. Let the tale begin. Chapter 161, outside the Shiganshina district, at the newly established Survey Corps outpost. Lock! Finally! Hang Zoe's voice carried across the yard as she dashed forward, lab coat fluttering behind her. You have no idea how long I've been waiting for you. I need a live Titan for my next experiment. Do you know how rare those are now? Locke barely had time to dismount before Hang was already circling him like an eager hawk. Her gaze flicked past him and landed on the three figures trailing close behind, Petra, Emer, and Historia. When her eyes fell on Historia, her expression brightened. Who's this little angel? She's adorable. Locke rubbed the back of his neck. This is Historia. I found her during the reclamation of Wall Maria. She volunteered afterward and's been under my care since. The royal government really has no shame, Hang muttered bitterly. Letting a child volunteer for combat, inhuman. Then, smirking, she leaned closer to Locke. Still, I see your taste hasn't changed. You always find the pretty ones. Locke sighed. Don't start. I usually spend my time with Petra and Emer, nothing like what you're thinking. Hang's grin widened as her eyes shifted toward Emer. Emer crossed her arms immediately. Don't even start, Four Eyes. I remember what happened last time. You're not dragging me into another one of your lunatic tests. Tests? Hang gasped dramatically. I prefer the term scientific exploration. Historia giggled despite herself, and even Petra had to stifle a laugh. You're all impossible, Hang muttered, pretending to pout. Fine, fine. Come inside. Standing out here makes it look like I'm harassing recruits. You kind of are, Locke muttered under his breath, earning a snicker from Petra. The group entered the outpost. Behind them, Locke's regiment of 300 soldiers began settling into their designated quarters, unloading gear, and checking weapons. The new base had been built on the outskirts of the reclaimed district, a network of hastily constructed barracks, stables, and watchtowers surrounded by open training fields. Civilians and members of the garrison regiment worked nearby, rebuilding Shiganshina's ruined infrastructure. Hang gestured toward the bustle outside. Not bad, right? The reconstruction's coming along faster than expected. The garrison is organizing the returning civilians, and the military police actually sent people to assist for once. If things keep up, the district might regain its old life soon. Locke scanned the area quietly. Garrison troops and military police patrolled the perimeter, their bright green cloaks fluttering in the cold wind. He noted, however, that the number of Survey Corps members present was drastically low, barely a dozen. He understood immediately. Once inside the headquarters, Hang's cheerful tone dropped. Her usual grin faded, replaced by rare seriousness. You've probably noticed. We're being suppressed. Locke didn't respond. The military police and garrison have started cutting off our supplies, she continued. Even some of our old allies are turning away. It's obvious, they're trying to sideline us now that the fighting's over. We were heroes a month ago, and now we're the problem. She slammed a stack of papers onto the table. Can you believe this? After everything we did out there, after how many of our people died? Locke's expression remained composed. Hang. Calm down. The steadiness in his voice worked immediately. She drew in a deep breath, shoulders relaxing as she rubbed her temples. Right. You're not surprised, are you? Locke smiled faintly. Not at all. Erwin and I expected this from the start. The Survey Corps outperformed every other branch. When you become too visible, the ones above you get nervous. Naturally, they want to push us down. So you plan for this? She asked, blinking. Of course. There's no need to fight the suppression, it buys us time. The others are busy bickering for favor while we rebuild quietly. When the next crisis comes, we'll be ready. Hang leaned back, whistling low. So, there is a next crisis? Locke chuckled. When isn't there one? He turned toward the window, eyes narrowing as he watched soldiers training outside. The real war hasn't even begun. Hang frowned but didn't press further. She'd known Locke long enough to recognize when he wouldn't elaborate. Anyway, Locke continued, his tone lightening, I came here for 2 reasons. First, to regroup and train the regiment stationed here. Second. His eyes flicked toward her. To capture a Titan for your research. At that, Hank's entire mood changed instantly. Finally! You're speaking my language. I've been dying to get my hands on another specimen. The last one got, well, accidentally exploded during an experiment. Locke raised an eyebrow. Accidentally. Details, she waved it off. So, what's the plan? A big hunt? Not big, Locke replied. A medium-sized operation. We'll test the new gear and train the recruits in live conditions. Medium-sized, Hang repeated with a grin. I like your version of medium. The tension in the air eased. Petra exhaled softly, relieved. Beside her, Emer and Historia had started whispering to each other again, bickering over something trivial. By noon, Hang had arranged a meal for everyone at the outpost mess hall, rough bread, soup, and whatever rations could be spared. It wasn't luxurious, but no one complained. After eating, Locke dismissed his soldiers for a brief rest, then called them back to the courtyard. Training resumes in 15 minutes, he announced. Within half an hour, the once quiet field erupted with the sounds of motion gear engaging, steel cables firing, and shouted commands echoing through the winter air. The regiment's precision was unmatched, each formation moving in perfect coordination. Civilians rebuilding nearby stopped to watch. Members of the garrison and military police exchanged uneasy looks. Why are they still training so hard? One soldier muttered. The Titans are gone. The walls are safe again. Another shrugged. They're Survey Corps. They don't know what rest means. I don't get it, said a third, leaning on his rifle. We finally have peace. Why not just enjoy it? Look at them, breaking their backs for what? A grizzled veteran from the garrison replied quietly, maybe because they remember what it's like to lose everything. The others fell silent for a moment. Across the yard, Locke ran alongside his soldiers, not barking orders but training with them, vaulting through the air with his maneuver gear, slicing through mock targets with practiced precision. His every movement was controlled, efficient, purposeful. By the time the sun began to sink, the squad was drenched in sweat and gasping for breath. Only Locke remained steady, breathing evenly, blade in hand. He looked over his exhausted troops and nodded once. That's enough for today. Clean your gear, eat, and rest. Tomorrow, we move closer to the wall for live Titan capture drills. The word Titan sent a ripple of excitement and fear through the group. Some straightened, others exchanged nervous glances, but none objected. Locke turned toward the watching soldiers from the other regiments, many of whom were still whispering among themselves. Their faces were mixed with doubt, envy, and even resentment. He ignored them. Strength didn't come from comfort, it came from readiness. As the cold evening wind swept across the outpost, Locke sheathed his blades, the faint metallic click echoing in the distance. Behind him, the fading light cast long shadows across the field, stretching toward the ruins of Shiganshina. He stood there a moment longer, gazing toward the remnants of the district beyond the walls. Somewhere out there, Titans still roamed, proof that peace was only a temporary illusion. And soon, humanity would need the Survey Corps again. Locke intended to make sure they'd be ready. Chapter 162, Outside the Walls of Shiganshina District. While Locke was overseeing the newly expanded garrison's military training, far within Walsina, Grisha had already begun the next step of his long-brewing plan. Night fell quietly over the capital. The stars hung like shards of glass in a velvet sky, their light reflected on the polished stone streets below. Behind tall windows, families sat together near their hearths, laughter rising with the smell of freshly baked bread. Children dozed on their mothers' laps, fathers discussed the day's work, believing their city untouchable, safe from the horrors beyond the walls. To most inside Shiganshina, this was paradise: abundant food, grand architecture, stable order. The wars and the titans felt like distant rumors, confined to faraway districts. But paradise, as always, was built on denial. That illusion shattered in an instant. A single, shrill scream split the night. Then another. Shouts followed, panic, disbelief, horror. The tranquility fractured under the sound of collapsing roofs and terrified cries. What is that? My God, it's a titan! There are titans inside the wall. Impossible! How could they be here? Where are the garrison and the military police? Chaos erupted as massive shadows lumbered through the Berlinsk district, the very heart of the royal capital, where the wealthy and powerful lived. More than a dozen titans had appeared without warning, tearing through streets and homes like paper. Some were trapped in narrow alleyways, their shoulders wedged between stone walls. Others broke free, crushing citizens beneath their feet. The capital, untouched for over a century, now echoed with the same screams that had once haunted Shiganshina. Neil Deek, commander of the military police, had been dining with his family when a trembling soldier burst into his home. "Commander, urgent report." The young man's face was pale, sweat dripping down his chin. "Titans have appeared inside Shiganshina." Neil shot to his feet, his chair scraping hard against the floor. "What did you say?" "Titans, inside the wall?" "Yes, sir. Over a dozen. Casualties are already in the dozens, maybe more." "They're in which district?" Neil demanded, gripping the soldier's shoulder. "The Berlinsk district, sir. Where most of the nobles reside." Neil's face drained of all color. His knees nearly gave way, and he collapsed into his chair, whispering, "It's over." The Berlinsk district was the most fortified and prestigious neighborhood within the capital, home to high-ranking officers, ministers, and wealthy merchants. The appearance of titans there wasn't just a catastrophe, it was political suicide for the garrison and military police. If any of the nobles died, the chaos wouldn't stop with the streets, it would ripple through the entire power structure of the walls. For a brief, shameful moment, Neil felt relief that he had chosen to move his family away from that district. But the thought passed as quickly as it came. He had no time to hesitate. "Send word to the Survey Corps immediately," he ordered, his voice shaking but firm. "Request full support from Commander Irwin. Mobilize every available soldier in the capital and coordinate with the garrison corps. We have to contain them before dawn." "Yes, Commander." The soldier saluted and sprinted out. Neil stood by the window, watching smoke rise in the distance. How did they get in?" he muttered. The question twisted his gut. Titans weren't supposed to appear within the inner walls, certainly not this deep. No breaches had been reported. No alerts from the wall guard. There was only one answer he could think of, and it chilled him to the bone: this wasn't an accident. Meanwhile, in a dimly lit office at the Survey Corps outpost near Shiganshina's inner gate, Irwin Smith stood by his window, watching the distant glow of fire reflect off the clouds. "Lock," he murmured, eyes narrowing. "So, it begins." He folded his hands behind his back, his expression unreadable, part resignation, part grim determination. "No destruction, no construction," he said quietly. "If we're to rebuild this world, we must first tear down the illusion that sustains it." He had known this moment would come. Locke's unspoken plan, to release a limited number of titans inside the capital, wasn't born of cruelty, but of necessity. The corruption at the heart of the royal government could not be dismantled through politics or reason. Only fear could shake those at the top from their complacency. The sound of distant bells carried faintly through the air, alarms spreading across the city. Irwin exhaled slowly. "I hope you know what you're doing, Locke. I've staked our future on you." He turned, pulling open a concealed panel behind his desk. A narrow passage extended downward, leading to a sealed chamber. Without hesitation, Irwin disappeared into the shadows, leaving his office empty. Moments later, another soldier burst in, gasping for air. "Commander Irwin! Commander, where are you? Titans have breached the capital." His frantic footsteps echoed through the empty hall, but the captain was nowhere to be found. At the heart of the chaos, the garrison corps and military police tried to mount a defense. The night should have been their advantage. The Titans were slower, their movements sluggish under the moonlight, but the streets were flooded with torches and lanterns, the glow of the city so bright it mimicked daylight. That light, which once symbolized civilization, has now become their undoing. The Titans' eyes gleamed in the brightness, their sluggishness fading as they grew more active. The soldiers fought valiantly, but their blades trembled in untrained hands. Many hadn't seen battles since their graduation. For years, they had guarded gates and escorted nobles, never Titans. Panic spread faster than command. A captain shouted over the din, "Form a perimeter. Don't let them reach the inner square." "Commander Deke," another voice cried. "Two abnormal Titans are heading straight for the district center." Neil drew his sword and gritted his teeth. "Damn it! Engage! Hold the line!" The ground shook as one of the abnormals, a twisted, 4-meter crawler, lunged forward, scattering soldiers like leaves. The other, towering over 10 meters, let out a deafening roar that shattered glass and courage alike. Flames illuminated the destruction, the once pristine mansions now piles of debris. Screams rose from every direction, blending into an endless, wailing chorus. Neil's mind reeled. Where is the Survey Corps? Why haven't they arrived yet? But no answer came. His men looked at him with hollow eyes, fear, exhaustion, and resignation. Many had never expected to die in combat. And now, under the same moonlight that had once promised peace, they realized they were trapped inside a nightmare. Hours passed before the distant thunder of ODM gear finally echoed through the city. "Blades, prepare. Survey Corps incoming." A voice rang from above. "Hold your positions. Reinforcements are here." Figures swooped through the air, their maneuvering lines cutting across the rooftops. The green cloaks of the Survey Corps fluttered in the firelight, their insignia catching the glow, the wings of freedom. They moved with precision, striking swiftly at the Titans' napes. The chaos began to shift. Within minutes, the tide of battle turned. For the civilians, it was salvation. For the military elite, it was humiliation. The same soldiers they had mocked and marginalized were now the ones saving their city. High above, perched on the remnants of a roof, a lone soldier observed the carnage below. His hood concealed his face, but his tone was calm, almost cold. It worked. He turned away from the smoke-filled skyline, whispering to himself, "The balance has been broken. From here, everything changes." The figure disappeared into the shadows, Locke's presence like a ghost passing through the heart of a collapsing order. By dawn, the streets were silent again. The Titans had been slain, their corpses smoldering in the ruins. The air reeked of blood and smoke. Soldiers dragged bodies, some human, some monstrous, into heaps. Neil stood amidst the destruction, his uniform torn, his eyes hollow. The capital had survived, but the cost was staggering. He looked up at the brightening sky and muttered, "The age of peace is over." Somewhere far beyond the walls, Locke continued his preparations, knowing the dominoes had begun to fall exactly as planned. For humanity to move forward, the false paradise had to burn. Chapter 163, this night would be remembered for generations, etched into the minds of those who survived the sudden Titan attack within Walsina. For many, it was the first time they had seen such monsters up close. For others, it shattered the illusion of safety they had long clung to. The Survey Corps really are the only ones who can deal with Titans. That's right. The military police only know how to bully civilians. They're useless when it actually matters. And the garrison, they should stick to repairing walls. I don't get it. The government pours resources into those units while the Corps fighting beyond the walls starve for supplies. Is this what they call leadership? Forget it. What I can't figure out is how the Titans appeared inside Walsina in the first place. There was no alarm, no breach. I didn't hear anything either. They appeared out of nowhere, in the Noble District, too. Maybe someone wanted to send a message. I just hope this doesn't happen again. If the Survey Corps had a larger presence inside the walls, I'd actually feel safe for once. That's impossible. They're still recovering from the last operation to reclaim Wall Maria. The Corps took massive losses. And instead of replenishing their ranks, the government funneled funds into reconstruction and the military police again. It's ridiculous. Tell me about it. The streets still smoked with the scent of blood and ash. Bodies, what was left of them, were being gathered beneath a cold moon. Commander Neil Decker of the military police looked on with a furrowed brow as his men cleared debris and dragged corpses out of the rubble. His face was twisted with irritation. The rumors spreading through the inner districts were already out of control. Damn it, this is going to turn everything upside down. He glanced toward the advancing convoy, Survey Corps scouts, their cloaks tattered but their formation disciplined. At their head walked Commander Erwin Smith, silent and composed, his expression unreadable even as he passed through the wreckage. The contrast was hard to miss. While the military police stood frozen, bickering and fumbling with orders, the Survey Corps had been the first to act. They moved swiftly, killing every Titan that appeared inside the wall. They had saved hundreds of lives before the garrison even arrived. Neil clenched his jaw. The facts were undeniable. The Survey Corps were far more capable. For most within Wall Sina, this attack was their first brush with true terror. It shattered the myth of absolute safety. The idea that Titans could never reach them, gone in one night. Wall Sina was not invincible. Commander Zachary has arrived, someone called out. Neil turned as Premier Darius Zachary, head of the military, strode into the devastated district, flanked by high-ranking officials. The man's face was stern, the lines deepened with exhaustion. His eyes swept over the carnage, collapsed mansions, blood-stained cobblestones, the mangled remains of guards and nobles. The silence was suffocating. Buildings could be rebuilt. Dead officials could be replaced. But fear would linger. Once the illusion of safety is broken, it can never be restored. Hours later, in a hastily erected command tent near the site of the attack, Zachary convened a closed meeting. Erwin stood by the wall, silent, his eyes fixed on the map spread across the table. Neil Decker stood opposite him, visibly tense. Zachary's voice broke the silence. "What's the current report?" Neil hesitated, then spoke. "According to our investigation, more than a dozen Titans appeared suddenly tonight. No breach in the wall was detected, and there was no warning from any gate. The damage among the upper districts is severe. Logistics, agriculture, armament, all their senior officials were wiped out." "All dead?" Zachary's brow furrowed. "Yes, sir," Neil said grimly. "And we couldn't even recover their bodies. Most were devoured." The Premier leaned back, exhaling slowly. His eyes showed no sorrow, only calculation. It was a disaster, but one that might have power. For decades, many of those dead men had been key backers of the military police and the royal administration. Their deaths weakened the government's political backbone overnight. Neil understood it all too well. His fists tightened behind his back. The Survey Corps will rise after this. They had fought the Titans. They had saved lives. And now, they would gain influence. Meanwhile, the military police, pampered by luxury and untouched by real battle, looked incompetent before the people. He stole a glance at Erwin. The man's expression hadn't changed, calm and unreadable. His silence unnerved Neil more than any words could. Could it be him? The thought flashed through Neil's mind before he shook it off. No. As much as he distrusted Erwin, smuggling a dozen Titans into Wall Sina was impossible. The walls and gates were under constant guard, and the garrison maintained strict records of movement. Still, something about this felt deliberate. Coordinated. So how did these Titans get in? Neil muttered. No one answered. Far from the city, a hooded figure moved quietly through the crowds of evacuees leaving the capital. Grisha Yeager kept his head down, his pulse steady, though tension flickered behind his eyes. When the last of the people had passed through the gates, he turned back once, gazing toward the smoke rising over the inner district. His lips tightened. "This is just the beginning," he whispered. On a crumpled scrap of paper in his pocket was a list of names, men and women who had corrupted the system from within. There were over 30, but Grisha had managed to contact nearly all of them before the night began. By now, most were dead. It had cost lives, innocent ones, too, but the plan was in motion. With their influence gone, the rest will fall soon enough. He murmured the words to himself as he slipped away into the darkness. When he reached his home in the quiet district of Walsina, the lamps were still burning. His wife's voice called from the next room. "You're back late, Grisha." He forced a small smile and stepped into the bedroom. There was a patient outside the district. It took longer than expected. Carla frowned. "You're filthy. Go wash up before you touch anything." "Right," he said quietly. Behind the weary routine of husband and wife, shadows deepened. Outside, the faint tolling of the bell marked the passing of midnight. Elsewhere, across the capital, the sleepless night dragged on. Nobles trembled in their estates, whispering theories of betrayal and divine punishment. Commoners gathered in the streets, recounting what they had seen, huge, skinless creatures tearing through the mansions of the powerful. "So that's a Titan," someone murmured, staring blankly into the firelight. "It's worse than I imagined. To think the Survey Corps fights those things outside the walls every day." Understanding began to spread. Admiration, too. The Corps, once scorned and mocked as reckless fools, was now seen as humanity's true shield. Meanwhile, distrust grew toward the other branches of the military. The military police, bloated with privilege, had failed to protect even the nobles they served. The garrison had been slow to react, more focused on procedure than survival. And above them all, the royal government trembled. If Titans could appear inside Walsina without warning, then nowhere was safe. Nowhere. Even among the city's elite, the realization dawned like a curse: the walls that had guarded them for a century were not eternal. At dawn, the first light revealed the full devastation. Craters where homes once stood. Streets soaked in blood. Erwin stood at the edge of the district, watching soldiers collect the remains of what few could still be identified. Behind him, Levi and Hang arrived with a small detachment, their expressions grim. "Any findings?" Hang asked quietly. "None," Erwin replied. "No breaches, no movement from the outer gate. It's as if the Titan simply appeared." Levi's gaze swept over the carnage. "Then whoever's behind this knows how to bypass our defenses. That's worse than any wall breach." Erwin's eyes narrowed slightly, his thoughts already turning ahead. "We'll prepare for a council meeting tomorrow. Zachary will demand answers, and the people will demand protection. We'll give them both." The wind caught his cloak, lifting the wings of freedom into the air as he turned back toward headquarters. For the first time in years, the people of the Wall saw the Survey Corps not as fools chasing glory beyond the horizon, but as the last hope of mankind. And for Erwin Smith, that was exactly the foothold he needed. Chapter 164. Before the first light had pierced the eastern sky, Locke was already awake, moving through his morning drills with the same relentless rhythm he favored in every waking hour. The courtyard's cold stone rang with the snap of his blades and the whisper of his ODM gear cables. He trained as if discipline could plug every hole in fate, because if he could not guarantee his own survival, then there was no right to rest. A list had been given to Grisha. Names of corrupt officials, merchants, and men who propped up a rotten order, enough to tilt the balance in favor of the Survey Corps if many of them were removed. Locke's thoughts returned to that list between repetitions of footwork and lunges. He did not expect perfection, he expected results. Reduce resistance, and the path of the Corps to rise within the walls would be that much clearer. Later confrontations with the Reiss line would be easier to arrange. The Survey Corps, Kenny Ackerman's irregulars, the 3 intelligent titans the scouts spotted, Historia with her bloodline, and Dina Fritz. If we can exploit every card, it still may not be enough, he murmured to himself, feeling the weight of every piece on the invisible board. Around him, soldiers from the military police and the garrison who had been on patrol all night watched with wary curiosity. Many bore the same look, respect mixed with thinly veiled calculation. Control the military police and the garrison, and control the inner politics of the walls. It was an attractive idea, one that came with an obstacle list the size of a gate. Neil Deeker's family ties were a potential lever. Pisces, an old fox in the palace, would be less obvious to influence. Locke allowed himself one small smile and pushed it away. Strategy was a slow knife, it rarely showed its edge until the moment it cut. Soon, the camp's biological clock stirred as one. Men and women who had slept in shifts for the last 2 nights rolled out of their blankets and gathered for the morning muster. They had seen banners of smoke on the horizon and smelled the metallic tang of blood. Sleep had been thin. Locke's drills wound down to crisp technique as squad leaders organized weapons and harnesses. 5 minutes to mental checks. 10 minutes to tendon tightening. Then, the march toward breakfast and the briefing. At the mess, conversations moved between sullen and nervous. Recruits, 300 of them, sat in tight rows, their expressions taut with apprehension. Veterans of the Shiganshina push exchanged curt nods. The memory of that campaign still haunted many, but it had forged others into a tempered edge. Captain Levi may be called the strongest man alive, one of the recruits whispered to a neighbor, but I heard rumors, he still couldn't move people like Locke. Petra Rahl glanced up from her bowl, eyes amused. Emer, reclining with habitual unconcern, tilted her head and folded her arms. Hank's voice, high and earnest, cut through the low clatter. He trains that much because he doesn't feel finished yet. Strength is never a finished thing. Locke set down his cup and looked at them with the same bluntness he reserved for the field. Because I'm not strong enough, he said simply. Petra cocked an eyebrow. How strong is enough? Locke gave a dry, small smile. Strong enough to tear a titan apart with my hands. A hush fell, edged with incredulous laughter and a few tremors. The recruits' faces tightened. Talk of tearing titans with bare hands felt like a myth made of bone and stubborn pride. Hank's eyes shone with a scientist's delight and a leader's concern. Locke, you're going into Shiganshina today, right? Not just me, Locke replied. All 300 recruits entered today. There was a staccato intake of breath. For veterans who had fought in the recapture of Wall Maria, the news held less dread. Experience had a way of smoothing terror into grim efficiency. But for those who had never left the relative safety of inner walls, the prospect of encountering titans in Shiganshina for the first time hollowed out their appetites. Metal clinked as hands tightened on knives. Eyes flicked to harnesses. Locke watched them in silence for a long moment. He understood the knot in their stomachs. He had felt it himself the first time he left the wall. No amount of drilling could entirely remove that first, deep dread. It had to be met on the field and survived, or not. Bring it in, Hang murmured, half joke, half prayer. There are many of them. Can you look after all of them? Locke shrugged. I can't take care of everyone. His voice grew colder, deliberate. You don't fight to be taken care of. You fight to survive. Either you make it through the slaughter, or you don't. Only those who come back alive at the end of the day can call themselves strong. A silence like a drawn sword followed. Even Emer looked serious. Grisha's plan was already in motion. The hour for soldiers to be hardened had grown short. Harsh lessons would be suffered, and only the necessary ones retained. The quiet austerity of the morale talk shifted the breakfast into a functional silence. No more chatter. No more nerves. Only the grinding preparation. Equipment checks were brisk. Straps were tightened with practiced fingers. Blades were oiled and tested. Every recruit's harness was inspected by an older hand. Then, the ascent to the walls by elevator, an old mechanism, groaning but faithful. The air was thin and cold at the top. Before them, the old district spread, once proud houses now ragged against the horizon, and between them, oddly calm, Titans wandered. The sight of a living Titan up close never failed to steal breath. Compared to the last time the Corps had come this way, the number of Titans in Shiganshina had increased. Among them were grotesque variations, limbs bent at unnatural angles, gait stutters, odd growths that testified to the ugly unpredictability of Titan physiology. They prowled streets and courtyards, ignorant of the significance of their presence. For those who had read about Titans in maps and lessons, this was the raw, unedited version. Locke stood before the assembled companies, cloak whipping in a steady wind. "These are Titans," he said, voice even. "We've practiced this until our arms and legs could do it blind. Today, you'll put that practice to use. Unlike drills, there are no do-overs. One mistake and you may not have comrades left to cover you. So listen, work together, watch each other's flanks, and trust your gear." He paused, scanning faces, a patchwork of fear and determination. He fixed his gaze on Petra. The young woman nodded imperceptibly. The recruits' eyes tracked her, their silent admiration audible in the collective intake of breath. Petra launched first. She leapt from the wall with the fluid, confident arc of someone utterly at home with the three-dimensional maneuver gear. The initial shock in the recruits' faces melted into awe as she threaded the cables, recovered height with a sharp pull, and positioned herself behind a Titan drifting at the wall's edge. With a single, practiced strike, she severed the nape. The sound was not triumphant, only precise. The Titan fell with a dull hush that somehow felt like the world exhaling. "Beautiful," someone breathed. "Graceful, decisive." Petra returned to the wall and drew her cloak tight for a moment as the recruits cheered. Locke allowed himself a brief, private nod. Demonstrations were necessary. They converted fear into a template for imitation. 5 men to a squad, Locke said, voice moving over them like a circuit of command. "Today's objective is to clear the Titans near the wall, dozens of them. We set the perimeter, then push inward as we secure pockets. Watch for irregular behavior. If a Titan shows signs of intelligence or unusual coordination, fall back and call for Corps support." A murmur ran through the recruits, the word intelligence stung. Titans with intent altered everything. The old rhythms of battle, muscle memory, blade angles, timing, were not enough when the enemy could think, however poorly. Locke tightened the straps on his own harness. The ODM gear hummed and clicked under its tension. Today would not be about heroics, it would be about hard, methodical work. Men and women would be counted, corpses recorded, and survivors returned. The function served both the living and the strategies of the living. There was no room for sentiment. When the squads launched, Locke moved with measured speed. He guided teams through rehearsed maneuvers, cutting Titans down in sequences practiced until the choreography seemed embedded in bone. The recruits who had watched from the wall now performed under the sky's unflinching scrutiny. Some faltered, a few slackened unexpectedly and were caught by quick hands. A couple of blades struck poorly and required emergency adjustments. Locke cursed under his breath once and then kept moving. Panic was a contagion, discipline was the antidote. By the time midday settled into a furnace-bright glare, the initial ring of Titans at the wall had been cleared, but Shiganshina still scoped the horizon with a wilder scattering of Titans inside the district. Each corner cleared revealed another scene, half-consumed market stalls, collapsed roofs, and the occasional ruined militia post. The work was grim and mechanical, but it was work that kept the dead count from swelling beyond reason. Locke's mind remained partly on the other game being played in the capital, the removal of men who supported entrenched power, Grisha's moves, and the political ripple they would cause. Today's success in Shiganshina would matter in that larger equation. Corps that proved reliable in battle gained public favor translated to influence, influence opened pathways to change. Lives were being wagered for the chance to alter a system grown raw deep. Locke didn't delude himself about the cost. He measured it, counted it, and adjusted his hand accordingly. When the sun began its slow descent, the last of the immediate objectives had been met. The recruits came down from the sky, faces smeared with sweat and grime, and their steps were heavier but steadier. They had seen Titans. They had killed them. Their hands trembled less. Petra moved among them with practiced warmth, encouraging the shaken and praising the competent. Hang scribbled notes furiously, unbidden curiosity lighting her eyes even after the day's peril. Emer lounged on a crate, expression unreadable but seemingly satisfied. Locke, alone for a moment, allowed himself a glance skyward. The walls rose like a promise, old, heavy, and imperfect. Beyond them, choices were being made, some quiet and deadly, some loud and angry. Today had been about survival, training turned to action. Tomorrow would be about consequence, political tides and the slow gear of change clicking into place. He tightened his cloak and walked back toward the barracks, boots sounding steady on stone. The Corps was alive and breathing. More importantly, it had proven that it could still act where others faltered. The campaign to tilt power beneath the walls had taken its first measurable step. For now, that would have to be enough. Chapter 165. The air was filled with the piercing roar of ODM gear jets, punctuated by shouts echoing off the ruined walls of Shiganshina. Watch the left flank. Keep the formation tight. A Titan is closing in from the right, move now. Shoot its eyes. Don't give it a chance to stand. The battlefield below the wall was a storm of movement, smoke trails, metallic flashes, and cries that merged into one continuous rhythm of survival. More sweat in training, less blood in battle. The results of endless drills and grueling preparation were finally revealing themselves. Locke stood atop the wall, arms folded, the wind catching his cloak as he watched the recruits and veterans fight below. The teams moved like extensions of each other, 5 to a unit, darting between rooftops and alleyways, slicing at Titan apes with precision that came only from repetition and discipline. Their performance wasn't perfect, but it was good, better than Locke had dared to hope. For months, he'd driven them mercilessly. Every drill had been designed to strip away fear and hesitation until only instinct remained. And now, as steam rose from fallen Titans and the morning sun broke through the haze, that instinct was all that kept them alive. Left formation, adjust your angle. Don't get greedy with your kills. Locke's voice carried over the wall, sharp and commanding. Below, Petra Rahl and Gunther Schultz were already leading their units deeper into the district. The smell of burnt flesh and compressed gas hung in the air. Petra sliced through a Titan's tendons, flipped midair, and plunged her blades into the back of its neck. Steam erupted, engulfing her for a moment before she disengaged, her movement clean and effortless. "They're excellent," she murmured through her gas mask, landing beside Locke a few minutes later. Her voice carried both pride and exhaustion. All that training, it wasn't wasted. Locke didn't turn. His amber eyes stayed on the chaos below. With this kind of equipment and preparation, anything less would be unacceptable. Petra frowned slightly. "You really don't hold back on them, do you?" "No," Locke replied calmly. "Because the Titans won't either." She fell silent. There was no arguing with that. The recruits fighting below weren't ordinary soldiers, they were the result of his vision, his obsession. Each one had been trained to fight not just Titans, but fear itself. They came from the worst conditions imaginable, orphans, vagrants, survivors from the underground. They'd already faced humanity's cruelty long before ever facing a Titan. That was what made them unbreakable. At first, their strikes had been clumsy. Screams of panic cut through the air as Titans lunged and walls crumbled. But under the steady guidance of the veterans, something changed. The recruits began to breathe in rhythm with their movements, blades flashing in unison, anchor cables whistling, steam rising from clean, efficient kills. Within half an hour, nearly half of the Titans that had been wandering near the wall were dead or dying. The battle was turning. Petra exhaled, lowering her blades. "They're better than I expected. Maybe you were right to be so hard on them." Locke's expression didn't change. "Maybe." But Petra knew what he was thinking. His mind wasn't on today's battle, it was already elsewhere. Beyond the walls. Beyond the smoke. She glanced sideways at him. You're still thinking about Marley, aren't you? Locke's jaw tightened. Always. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Only the rhythmic hiss of ODM gas filled the silence. Finally, Petra broke it. Marley's technology is still decades ahead of ours. Their military strength, their weapons, even their use of the Titans, they're beyond anything we have here. She hesitated. If they ever stop fighting their other wars and turn their attention fully toward us, then Parody will fall, Locke finished for her, his tone flat. Yes. I know. He closed his eyes briefly, the image of Marley's airships and artillery flashing through his mind. He'd seen those memories. Through the fragments passed down, through whispers of those who knew what existed beyond the sea. And yet, fear wasn't what filled him. It was determination. We still have time, he said finally. As long as the power of the founding Titan remains on this island, Marley won't risk a full-scale invasion. They're afraid of what it can do, even though they don't fully understand it. Petra nodded. But that power is still in the hands of the royal family. And you know how cowardly they are. If they're pushed to the edge, they might hide instead of fight. That's why we can't rely on them, Locke said coldly. We need to take control of that power ourselves, someone with royal blood who's willing to act. Petra studied him carefully. You've already started something, haven't you? That caught him off guard. His gaze flicked to her, sharp. What makes you say that? She smiled faintly. Call it instinct. Women's intuition, he said dryly. Exactly. And this time, I'm certain. Locke didn't respond. He turned his attention back to the city, to the chaos still unfolding below. But Petra's words lingered. He thought of Grisha Yeager, already moving through the interior, carrying out the plan they discussed. One list, just a list of names. Officials. Nobles. Obstacles. Nothing that could be traced back to Locke directly. But the effect, if successful, would shake the walls to their foundations. Petra's voice brought him back. You really think it'll work? Taking the founding Titan for ourselves? It has to, Locke replied quietly. If we wait for the world to show mercy, we'll die waiting. Below them, the battle was finally winding down. Steam rolled across the district like fog. Of the dozens of Titans that had roamed near the walls, only a handful remained. Locke raised his hand. Signal retreat. Gunther fired a flare, and the soldiers began to pull back toward the wall, their ODM cables hissing as they disengaged. By the time the last team returned, the field was littered with steaming carcasses and shattered masonry. The smell of burned flesh and metal filled the air. Petra landed beside him again, wiping sweat from her brow. Casualties? 17 dead, she said softly. 9 wounded, mostly minor. For a first large-scale engagement, it could have been worse. Locke nodded. Gather the team leaders. I want detailed reports, equipment performance, gas consumption, blade durability, and formation success rates. Everything. Petra raised an eyebrow. You really can't relax for a second, can you? He almost smiled. Relaxation gets people killed. As she left to carry out his orders, Locke walked to the edge of the wall and looked down once more. The rising sun caught on the pools of steam, painting the ruined streets in gold and silver light. This was their first test, and they'd passed. Barely. Still, it wasn't enough. He could already sense it, the coming storm. Marley's war machines, their airships, their soldiers trained since childhood. Titans controlled by people who saw Parody as nothing more than devils to be exterminated. If Parody were to survive, they would need more than courage. They'd need strategy, unity, and power that could stand against the world. Locke's gaze shifted to the far end of the district, where a lone Titan stood motionless amid the ruins. It was larger than the rest, with an unsettling grin frozen across its face. Its eyes seemed to follow him. Locke's hand instinctively went to the hilt of his blade. For a moment, the world was still, just the wind, the sunlight, and that silent, monstrous smile. Then he exhaled slowly, lowering his arm. "Good," he muttered. "You haven't left yet." He turned away from the wall, his cloak billowing behind him as he walked toward the command platform. "I'll deal with you soon enough." Behind him, the recruits cheered, celebrating their victory. For them, it was a triumph, a hard-fought first success. For Locke, it was only the beginning. Chapter 166. The morning air was sharp, carrying the scent of dust and blood from the previous day's battle. Locke stood at the edge of the barracks courtyard, fastening the clasps on his ODM gear while the faint light of dawn spilled across the rooftops. The events of the past few days still echoed in his mind, the growing unrest within the walls, the hidden movements of the royal government, and above all, the plan that now depended on Grisha Yeager's success. There was one final piece left to secure, the capture of Dina Fritz, the so-called Smiling Titan. A crucial figure. Too important to risk mishandling. Locke knew the implications of failure. If he could retrieve Dina and keep her under their control, the Survey Corps would hold leverage unlike anything the government or Marley could anticipate. But if she escaped, or was killed, the threads connecting the founding Titan's power might be lost forever. He would not allow that. "Everyone ready?" Locke said, voice calm but cold. "We move now." Within moments, the team of elite soldiers, handpicked from the most skilled among the Corps, secured their harnesses. Steam hissed as their ODM gas canisters engaged, and with a synchronized pull of their triggers, they launched into the air. "Move at full speed," Locke commanded. "We locate the target before sunrise." The morning wind roared past as they swept over the outer rooftops of the Shiganshina ruins. Locke's squad advanced swiftly, cutting across the wreckage of old homes, their steel cables flashing in the dim light. Ahead of them, a single massive figure moved clumsily between the broken structures, its body familiar to Locke even from this distance. Dina Fritz. She wandered with the eerie, human-like smile that had haunted the nightmares of many. Her expression was grotesquely serene, her empty eyes half-lidded as if she understood something no one else could. Locke halted on a tall building and gestured for his team to stay back. "Hold position. I'll draw her to the perimeter." "Understood, sir." Petra Rahl's clear voice replied through the receiver. The others, Gunther Schultz, ELD Jin, Aluo Bozado, and several new squad members, spread out to control the flanks. Locke took a deep breath, then leapt forward. His cables clanged against metal as he swung low, closing in on the lumbering Titan. He didn't strike. Instead, he fired a flare into the air, a bright burst of red that drew the Titan's attention instantly. Dina's massive eyes turned. Her grotesque grin widened, and she began to move. "Good," Locke muttered. "Follow me." He led her deliberately toward the edge of the district, clearing the path of other pure Titans with quick, efficient slashes. Each kill was precise, clean, practiced, emotionless. Behind him, the thundering steps of the 15-meter Titan grew closer, shaking the broken stone beneath his boots. On the walls ahead, Petra had already arranged the support units. They were prepared to lure away stray Titans and open a path for the capture. When Locke's flare signaled approach, Hang Zoe adjusted her goggles and peered through the steam rising from the battlefield. "There he is," she murmured. "And that Titan, something about her feels off." Petra nodded, eyes fixed on Locke's movement. "He must have his reasons. He doesn't risk his life without one." Hang smirked. "You sound like his disciple. If Locke told you to jump off the wall, would you?" Petra's cheeks flushed. "If it served the mission." Hang blinked, then laughed. "Unbelievable. You're hopeless." Still, even as she teased, her gaze returned to the approaching Titan. Something about its smile unsettled her. Locke landed on the final rooftop before the wall and turned to face Dina Fritz. His blades gleamed silver in the morning light. "Right here," he said quietly. "Let's finish this." The Titan's enormous shadow loomed over him. She reached out with one massive hand, her fingers twitching toward him like claws. Locke's cables fired. He twisted upward, spinning in the air, and both blades sliced downward in a flash of steel. Too slow. With one swift rotation, he severed the Titan's wrist tendons. Steam erupted. The enormous hand fell uselessly to her side. Locke didn't hesitate, his next strikes landed at the joints of her arms, cutting cleanly through sinew and bone. A sharp hiss of vapor burst from the wounds. The Titan's arms collapsed. Next, your legs. Locke fired his anchors again, landing against the Titan's thigh. A single slash and the flesh gave way, sending her to her knees with a heavy crash. The ground trembled. Now crippled, the Titan still didn't scream. She simply stared at him, smiling that same hollow, knowing smile. Locke's eyes narrowed. Still smiling, even now? He landed on her chest, crouched low, and plunged both blades into her jaw. The impact tore through her mouth, rendering her incapable of biting or howling. Steam poured from the gaping wound. Then he whispered, so softly only he could hear. "Don't worry. You'll see him soon." It was as if the Titan understood. Her movements slowed, and her breathing, if it could be called that, fell into a strange rhythm. Moments later, Petra and Hang arrived, their ODM lines clinking against the Titan's still form. Both landed beside Locke, taking in the sight of the restrained, dismembered creature. "She's just another pure Titan," Hang said quietly, puzzled. "So why risk your life to bring this one back?" Locke didn't answer immediately. He cleaned the blood from his blades, eyes fixed on the Titan's eerie expression. "Dangerous," Hang continued, her voice rising. "You went deep into the central zone alone. You could have been killed." Locke turned his head slightly, meeting her stare with calm detachment. "Not dangerous. Calculated." "Don't play games with me, Locke," she said, irritation clear in her tone. "What makes this Titan special?" Locke's lips curved faintly. "She seems to like me." Hang froze, then frowned. "That's not funny." "I wasn't joking." She sighed in exasperation, pulling off her goggles. "Fine. You keep your secrets. But I'll find out myself. I'll dissect her if I have to." Petra interjected quietly, "Captain, maybe that's enough for now. Let's just secure her first." Locke nodded. "We're moving her inside the wall. She's a priority target." "But—" "That's an order," Locke said sharply. "Move her before other Titans catch the scent of blood." Hang hesitated. Then, reluctantly, she saluted. "Yes, Deputy Commander." Even so, her eyes gleamed with defiance. She wasn't done questioning him. The soldiers below began executing the capture procedure. Steel cables were embedded deep into the Titan's torso as winches on the wall slowly drew her up, inch by inch. The ground shook beneath the strain. Locke remained on the wall's edge, watching every detail, ready to intervene at the first sign of instability. Petra coordinated the squad's movements with flawless efficiency, her voice cutting through the roaring steam. "Line 2, stabilize her left shoulder. Line 3, pull steady." Gradually, the mutilated Titan rose above the parapet, steaming heavily, her limp limbs dangling over the wall. The operation, against all odds, was a success. When Dina Fritz was finally secured inside the wall, Hang exhaled, still staring at her with fascination. "She's unsettling," Hang murmured. "That expression, why does it feel like she recognizes him?" Locke didn't respond. His gaze remained cold, distant. Inside, though, he felt the faintest flicker of conflict. He knew who she had once been. He knew what she meant to Grisha Yeager, and by extension, to everything that would come next. But those were truths that could never leave his lips, not yet. The core needed stability, not the chaos of revelation. "Maintain guard," he ordered. "No one approaches her without authorization. Hang, you'll get your study later. Right now, she's too valuable." Hang crossed her arms. "Fine. But you're going to tell me what this is really about, Locke." "Eventually." Locke turned away, his cloak catching the wind. When the time is right. By nightfall, the Titan had been restrained deep within a reinforced storage chamber near the base. Steam continued to rise from her wounds, filling the air with a faint metallic scent. Locke stood before the reinforced gates, silent. The torchlight flickered across his expression, calm, but heavy with purpose. Dina Fritz, the smiling Titan, was now within their grasp. The next step of the plan could finally begin. Locke exhaled slowly. We've taken one more step forward. Petra approached from behind, her voice soft. Do you ever rest, Commander? He didn't turn. Not until it's over. She smiled faintly, though her eyes reflected worry. Then it might be a long time before you do. Maybe, Locke replied. But until then, we move. Outside, the wind howled against the wall, carrying the faint echo of something vast and distant, an omen of the storm yet to come. And in the dark, behind the sealed chamber doors, Dina Fritz's lips still curved upward in that haunting, eternal smile. Chapter 167. The week that followed became a forge of discipline and brutality, exactly the kind of crucible that separated the truly capable from the merely hopeful. Under Locke's direct supervision, the recruits underwent relentless, daily combat drills against captured Titans. Each day brought casualties, inevitable for anyone who dared face the monsters outside the walls, but the number dwindled as training progressed. On the last morning, after the recruits eliminated more than 30 Titans in coordinated formation, not a single soldier died. Only 2 suffered minor injuries due to misjudged movements and ODM errors, but nothing grave enough to remove them from service. As the final group of soldiers ascended the lift platform back to the top of the training wall, Locke watched the rising silhouettes with a sharp, assessing gaze. Nearby, 3 captured pure Titans, restrained, gagged, and bound, were prepared for transport to Hang's temporary research station. It's almost time to go back, Locke murmured, his voice quiet beneath the wind. Petra Rahl, standing beside him, straightened slightly. He turned toward her. Give the order later, Locke said. We should arrive at headquarters by noon tomorrow. Understood, Petra replied. She took a breath, then added with the practical thoroughness Locke relied on. After this week's training, 268 recruits remain active. 37 sustain varying injuries, but none are serious. With a few weeks of rest and basic treatment, they'll return to full capacity. Locke gave a small nod. Good. They adapted faster than expected. His gaze drifted toward the horizon, toward the distant lines where sky met land, a boundary symbolic of everything still unknown. Be ready, he said quietly. A lot will happen when we return. Petra's posture tightened. Her brown eyes, resolute as tempered steel, met his. Since the day I chose to believe in you and follow you, I've been ready. She meant every word. With the memories she carried, echoes from Hoover, fragments of a past she never lived but somehow knew, Petra understood the danger pressing on Parody better than almost anyone else in the Corps. The island was weak. Surrounded by enemies. Cornered. Diplomacy would not save them. Only strength, real, decisive strength, would. And Locke, for all his youth, was carrying the weight of that future on his shoulders. Petra watched him with silent determination. He's under so much pressure. I'll support him with everything I have. The regiment assembled shortly after, packing equipment and loading the restrained Titans for transport. The elevator creaked as it lifted another group, and soldiers rushed back and forth, securing gear and preparing to move. Hang Zoe, however, had almost no interest in the usual influx of new Titans for study. Her attention was chained to the far corner of Locke's encampment, the tent containing Dina Fritz. Her obsession was palpable. Locke had moved Dina, crippled, bound, and still bearing that unsettling smile, to a reinforced holding structure draped in cloth. Hang had tried multiple times to request access, only to face immediate rejection from Locke and Petra both. At last, unable to hold back her curiosity, she approached Locke while he was reviewing the final logistics reports. Locke, Hang said, stepping directly into his path. When can I go back to headquarters? Locke paused. For a brief moment, he considered his reply. It won't be long, he answered. 2 to 3 months at most. Once the situation stabilizes, you won't have to deploy for field missions so frequently. Hank's eyes narrowed in suspicion. So you're planning to revoke my authority? She asked, voice low but sharp. There was something predatory in her expression, like a scientist analyzing a strange insect. Locke shook his head. No. But as a researcher, your talent is wasted on constant combat missions. I'll speak with Commander Irwin. Your time will be better spent in a laboratory, not risking your life in the field. Hank blinked once. Twice. Really? Really? Her entire demeanor flipped instantly. That's amazing. Do you know how long I've wanted this? Hank grabbed him without warning, pulling him into a tight embrace that was more forceful than her lanky frame suggested. Finally, someone understands. Locke endured the hug with mild resignation. Behind them, Petra stiffened, her jaw tensing in a way she tried to hide. She said nothing, but the air around her grew noticeably colder. From a short distance away, Emer raised an eyebrow. Oi! What exactly are you two doing? She shouted. Historia, Krista to those who still clung to old habits, covered her eyes with her hands, peeking through her fingers. This is inappropriate, she whispered. Hang instantly jumped back from Locke as if she'd been burned. No misunderstandings, she declared, waving her arms frantically. That was purely a friendly hug. Right, Locke? Locke shrugged. My side was purely friendly. I can't speak for yours. You absolute idiot. Hang swung a hand to smack him upside the head. But before it could land, Locke's instincts took over. He grabbed her wrist, pivoted sharply, and, using her own momentum, flipped her clean over his shoulder. Hang hit the ground with a thud that echoed across the camp. Ow! She groaned. Why does this keep happening to me? I reacted on instinct, Locke said. Sorry. Emer laughed. Well, I believe her now. That hug was definitely friendly. Krista knelt beside Hang, concern softening her expression. Are you okay, Captain? I'm fine. Hang muttered. Krista's the only sane one left around here. Krista smiled politely, and then promptly dodged Hang's attempt to pat her head. Only Locke gets to do that, she said sweetly. Hang stared at her in disbelief. Why is everyone around me like this? After confirming Hang wasn't injured, everyone drifted back to their preparations. But several soldiers kept glancing at Locke as if waiting for him to apologize or offer reassurance. Locke folded his arms. Don't look at me. That was me holding back. If I hadn't, she'd be in worse shape. Hang struggled upright. Should I thank you, then? Her tone made it absolutely clear that there was only one correct answer. Locke gave a thin smile. No need to thank me. Just stop randomly hitting me. I can't promise I'll be able to stop myself every time. You! Hang sputtered, hands trembling in frustration. But as she drew in a breath to continue, something in her expression shifted. A quiet heaviness replaced the irritation. Her shoulders dropped. You're leading tomorrow, she said softly. I'll be stuck out here again. For a moment, Locke saw past the manic energy and scientific obsession, saw the loneliness, the strain of isolation and relentless work. Petra stepped forward gently. Captain Hang, once Locke transfers you back to headquarters, you'll be free to research properly again. No more running around, no more chaos. Hang brightened instantly. Can I study that female titan? No. Locke's answer was immediate. Hang deflated dramatically. I really should have expected that. The next day arrived faster than expected. After a final inspection and quick midday meal, Locke led the regiment as they prepared to transport Dina Fritz back to headquarters. The recruits, no longer green, no longer shaken by the sight of their first kills, stood in tight formation. Their expressions were stronger, their eyes clearer. The fear that once clung to them had hardened into resolve. Those who survived this training had earned the title of soldier. They were worthy of being called elites. As the caravan began its departure, Hang shouted from atop the wall, waving her arms wildly. "Hurry up and transfer me back, too!" Locke didn't turn around, but a faint smile pulled at the corner of his mouth. The road home would be dangerous, complicated, and full of consequences he was already preparing to face. But for now, they moved forward. Chapter 168, Shiganshina, Southern Sector, Orva District. Locke, why does it feel like the atmosphere here is off? Emer's voice cut through the steady rumble of wagon wheels as the regiment's caravan crossed the stone-paved bridge into the district. Even without her saying it, Locke had already sensed it. The civilians, normally bustling or indifferent, were instead stiff, restless, faces drawn tight with unease. "Your intuition's working," Locke said calmly. "Something happened while we were away." The deeper they went, the more obvious it became. Civilians gathered along both sides of the road, far more than usual. Their eyes weren't focused on Locke or his soldiers, but on one specific wagon in the caravan. The one covered in reinforced cloth, where the outline of a restrained Titan could still be seen. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Shock. Fear. Hope. Soon, several civilians broke through the murmuring mass and rushed to Locke's side. "Vice Commander Locke, thank the walls, you've finally returned. Please, help us. The military police and the garrison can't control the situation anymore. The Titans almost broke through earlier this week. You even captured another Titan alive. The Survey Corps is the only force we can rely on." "That's right. Locke is nothing like the military police, he actually fights for humanity. No, he shouldn't be called captain anymore. He's the vice commander of the Survey Corps." The surrounding crowd echoed the sentiment, voices overlapping, emotions surging. Locke raised a hand, signaling for calm. Despite the pressure pressing on the district, his expression remained steady, grounded. "Everyone," Locke said, voice projected clearly, "whatever happened here, we will resolve it. You can return to your homes with peace of mind. Vice Commander Locke, we trust you. Please save us. We're counting on you." His tone, his posture, the certainty with which he spoke, calmed them. Even those who had been trembling beneath their cloaks straightened. A few wiped at their eyes. Locke's reputation had become something unshakable within the walls. Rhodes, desperate for public support, had never hidden Locke's achievements. In fact, the royal government pushed his image constantly, painting him as a brilliant young hero. Newspapers printed stories about him weekly. Merchants hung his likeness on banners. Children carved his name into practice swords. A boy who'd survived impossible battles. A soldier who'd led the recapture of Wall Maria. A vice commander who could kill Titans with ease. A symbol of hope. And now, with unrest scraping at the heart of Shiganshina, that symbol had never been needed more. The caravan finally passed through the district without interference. The military police, normally arrogant and disdainful, stood at attention and saluted stiffly as Locke's procession moved by. Their relief was palpable. They had lost control of the populace. They didn't know how to restore order. Locke's return meant their burden could be shifted onto shoulders far stronger than theirs. Kenny Ackerman could have restored stability, but his anti-personnel squad existed for assassination and suppression, not Titan combat. And Rhodes had confined him for internal security, leaving the MP helpless. When Locke's regiment crossed the final gate and arrived at the Survey Corps' headquarters, the atmosphere lifted visibly. Even the building seemed to breathe again. After securing the restrained Dina Fritz deep inside the restricted holding chamber, Locke headed for the commander's office. Petra and Emer followed. Historia, still under heavy supervision, was required to return to her quarters. At the office door, the guard straightened, relief washing across his face. "Vice Commander, you're finally back." Locke nodded and entered with Petra and Emer. Inside, Commander Erwin Smith looked up from a stack of files, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. Levi stood beside him, arms crossed, gaze unreadable. "You're here," Erwin said. Locke inclined his head. "We've returned. But it seems things in the capital aren't simple." "A few disturbances," Erwin replied. "Nothing irreversible. But the nobles and military police have been making noise in your absence. Now that you're back, the situation should stabilize." He paused, then added with quiet conviction, "And I assume my confidence in you isn't misplaced." Locke smiled faintly. "It seems the commander has more faith in me than I realized." Erwin rose without responding and moved to the tall bookcase. He pulled a specific volume, not for reading, but as a trigger. The section of wall beside the shelves slid open, revealing a narrow passage. A hidden chamber. "Come," Erwin said. "We'll speak inside." Locke turned to Petra and Emer. "Wait here. No one enters unless it's Commander Erwin himself." "Understood," Petra replied. Emer gave a curt nod. Locke stepped into the passage. The stone door sealed behind him, shutting out all noise. The room beyond was simple, a stone table, 3 chairs, torchlight flickering across ancient walls. A place for secrets. Erwin and Levi were already seated. Locke took the third seat without hesitation. "If you have questions," Locke said, "ask them directly. I'll answer all of them." Erwin didn't waste time. "Was it you?" he asked. "The incident in the interior?" Locke nodded. "It was part of my plan." Levi exhaled through his nose softly. "You've got guts." Locke smirked. "Courage is necessary. Nothing gets accomplished without it." Levi didn't argue. That alone was acknowledgement. Erwin steepled his fingers. "What do you intend to do now?" Locke answered without pause. "Seize the highest authority within the walls. Then, overhaul the political system. Parody will no longer isolate itself. We'll welcome outside knowledge, technology, and people. No invasions, no imperial ambitions, only self-preservation. Only self-protection." Erwin murmured. His expression shifted, controlled, but uneasy. Then he inhaled. "You truly trust what Emer told us? You're not worried her story contains deception?" Locke leaned forward slightly. "Even if part of her narrative is false, our current government is collapsing. Erwin, do you honestly believe the walls have a future if we leave power in the hands of those nobles?" Silence. Heavy. Honest. Levi didn't speak. But his jaw tightened ever so slightly. Neither of them could deny it. The royal government had strangled progress for more than a century. The Survey Corps had been starved, sabotaged, and obstructed. Advancement, technological or political, had been deliberately suppressed. Parody had no future if controlled by those who feared change more than extinction. Erwin finally exhaled. "I have no more questions," he said, voice steady. "Whatever you choose to do next, you will have my full support." The torchlight flickered, casting shadows along the walls, shadows of 3 men who understood the weight of what was coming. A power shift. A rewriting of the wall's fate. And a revolution that was no longer avoidable. Chapter 170. For the first time, Commander Erwin Smith had stated his stance so directly, and he had done so in front of Locke. No more ambiguity, no cautious circles, no diplomatic fencing. His support had been clear, unmasked. The rest of their discussion flowed more naturally. No matter how much each man concealed, the atmosphere had shifted. They were no longer testing one another. They were speaking as 2 forces preparing for the same storm. Of course, Locke wasn't reckless enough to reveal his entire plan. The time wasn't right, and certainty was still a luxury. Erwin might very well be genuine, but trust was a currency Locke couldn't spend cheaply. Not yet. And Erwin, calm, meticulous, calculating, was surely thinking the same. After close to an hour, Locke stepped out of the hidden chamber alone. Petra and Emer moved the moment they saw him. Locke! He lifted a hand slightly. A small gesture. A silent instruction. Not here. Not now. Both women understood instantly. Without another word, Locke led them out of Erwin's office. As he stepped through the door, he spared a brief, unreadable glance toward the station guard. Then he walked away. You trust him, Levi remarked without looking at Erwin, voice flat as stone. Erwin didn't deny it. I've repeated this many times, he said. My intuition rarely fails me. Locke can accomplish what neither you nor I ever could alone. His actions during the Titan incursion in the interior are more proof than we needed. The situation inside Walsina is no longer stable. It's not unstable, Levi corrected coldly. It's a mess. Erwin's lips curved faintly. A mess, yes. But that's only the surface. He regarded Levi, humanity's strongest soldier, unmatched in combat, yet uninterested in leading. It was a shame. Levi's individual strength rivaled entire battalions, but leadership required instincts he simply didn't possess, or didn't want. Locke, however. Locke possessed everything: power, charisma, political sensitivity, tactical brilliance. And the civilians adored him in a way they never had Erwin or Levi. Even if that adoration had been deliberately cultivated, it couldn't be ignored. Right now, Erwin continued, the interior is in chaos because of the Titan attack. Most of the government's upper echelon was wiped out. That makes this the best time? Levi interrupted, brow furrowing. Exactly. Erwin's eyes glinted with sharp conviction. The perfect time. Levi watched him for a long moment. He didn't like politics. He didn't care for speeches or plots. If it were up to him, he'd simply cut down whoever needed cutting and be done with it. Thinking about other people's motives was a headache. You really think this is the best time to move? He muttered. Erwin smiled helplessly. You have the capacity to lead, Levi. But you never had the desire. That's what separates you from Locke. Levi didn't seem insulted. Fine, he said. Then tell me. What exactly do you want me to do? Erwin straightened. We can't remain dormant anymore. With the government shaken, they've loosened their restrictions on the Survey Corps to desperately maintain order. Use this opening. Take our men. Go to the districts. Recruit. We need soldiers, loyal ones. Loyal to us, not to the crown. Levi's expression hardened. Oh? That's it? A slow, dangerous smile appeared. Good. I've been sick of those interior rats for a long time anyway. Revolution, even if whispered, had begun. Locke, Petra, and Emer quickly returned to their residential wing. As soon as they stepped inside the courtyard, a small blur of motion rushed toward them. A girl in a maid's outfit. Historia. She stopped in front of Locke, cheeks blooming pink. Welcome home, she said softly. Emer didn't hesitate, she immediately pulled Historia tightly into her arms. How can someone be this cute? She groaned dramatically. Petra laughed. Historia really is an angel. Locke sighed inwardly. No need to dress like that just to welcome me, silly girl. Without making a scene, he stepped forward and gently ruffled Historia's hair. Come on, he said simply. All three of you, let's go. Historia jolted, eyes widening. Wait, this fast, she squeaked. Emer released her immediately, turning to Locke with a ridiculously hopeful expression. Do you have any thoughts about me, too? Petra looked at them both, exasperated. Can we please not assume the worst immediately? She then looked at Locke, eyes warm. When are we leaving? Right now, Locke replied. Perfect timing for dinner. Okay, the three answered at once. Locke and the three women headed across the barracks grounds, passing through narrow alleys until reaching the two-story home Grisha shared with Harry. Laughter drifted from the small training yard. When Locke entered with the others, he saw 3 familiar figures. Eren Yeager, Armin Arlert, Mikasa Ackerman. All training is diligent. Talent was painfully obvious among the 3. Mikasa didn't even seem to be exerting herself, yet she surpassed the other 2 by leagues. Ackerman blood, Locke thought. An inborn strength beyond reason. The moment they noticed Locke, the children's faces brightened. "Brother Locke!" Eren shouted. "You're finally back. That means the Titans won't dare appear in the interior anymore, right?" "Yeah," Armin added nervously. "Everyone's been so scared, but since you returned, everything will be fine again." Mikasa didn't say anything, but the relief in her eyes was unmistakable. Locke couldn't help laughing. "You 3 have a lot of confidence in me." "Of course," they chorused proudly. At that moment, Carla Yeager stepped out of the doorway, drying her hands on an apron. "Don't exhaust Locke the moment he comes home," she scolded gently. "He just returned, let him breathe." "Yes, ma'am," the children said, obediently returning to their practice. Locke joined them for training, giving pointers. Petra watched, her expression softening with a warmth she rarely allowed herself to show. "He really has another side to him," she murmured. Ymir muttered, "I can't believe this guy is the same demon who trained us." But even she couldn't deny it. Locke looked gentle. Gentle in a way that contradicted everything about his battlefield presence. Her cheeks reddened slightly. Historia, now back in ordinary clothes, hesitated a moment, but eventually joined Eren and the others. She moved beside Locke with quiet determination, wanting to share even a small part of what he valued. For her, this home, this warmth, was something she'd never had. She wasn't letting it slip away. The harmony didn't last. The gate creaked open again, and a tired, dusty Grisha Yeager stepped into the yard. His eyes sharpened the moment they landed on Locke. "You're back," Grisha said, relieved. "Good. I have something urgent to tell you. Come with me to the room." "All right," Locke replied. "Father!" Eren protested instantly. "That's cheating. You just got home and you're taking Brother Locke away already." Locke chuckled and patted Eren's head. "I'll be back later. Keep practicing, you're still sloppy on your footwork." Eren straightened immediately. "Why yes, sir." Grisha watched the exchange, expression complicated. Then he motioned Locke inside. The door closed behind them. And the air shifted. Chapter 171, Grisha shut the door behind them, his breath unsteady. The moment the latch clicked, he stepped forward, unable to contain himself. "How is it?" Locke didn't need to guess what he meant. He nodded calmly, his tone steady but carrying the weight of a breakthrough long in the making. "Fortunately, it's done. I managed to bring her back. Now all we need is the right opportunity for her to devour the Founding Titan's holder." Grisha's shoulders trembled. Tears filled his eyes almost instantly. That's wonderful. Truly wonderful. For him, Dina Fritz was more than a wife. She was the partner who walked beside him during the darkest years, the one who shared his beliefs, his losses, his hopes. To have even a sliver of a chance at restoring her humanity, Grisha could hardly stand beneath the emotion of it. He wiped his eyes quickly, then continued in a hushed, urgent tone. "I've been preparing during this chaos. I managed to secure enough serum. The constant Titan incidents inside the walls left several officials injured or frantic, and it allowed me to get close. At any point, I can transform them into pure Titans. As reliable as ever." Locke's expression sharpened with purpose. "Once we secure the Founding Titan for Andina, we'll have the strength we need to overturn the power structure inside the walls. No more stagnation. No more isolation. And no more sacrificing Eldians for the benefit of a broken monarchy." Everything was moving exactly as Locke had envisioned. The Survey Corps was already leaning toward him. His strength and reputation alone were a tide. He held 3 Titan powers. If they obtained the founding Titan on top of that, no faction could stand against them. And as for those who refused to surrender, let them become pure Titans, laboring endlessly for the island's future. A slight grin crossed Locke's face as the thought surfaced. Pure Titans didn't age. They didn't tire. They didn't demand supplies or pay. An untapped workforce, if controlled properly. But of course, that depended on Dina being able to wield the founding Titan perfectly. Grisha nodded firmly. He had no hesitation, no doubts. The two spoke for a few more minutes, sorting out details and timing, tightening loose ends. Then they stepped outside together. Immediately, Aaron, Mikasa, and Armin, who had clearly been lingering by the hall, rushed forward. Brother Locke. Brother Locke, you're done talking now, right? Is everything okay? Locke couldn't help the small sigh that escaped him. Their dependence on him was growing, perhaps too much. He didn't know yet whether that was a good thing or a liability, but that was a problem for another day. He reached out and tapped Aaron lightly on the head. I'm not running away, you know. The 3 children grinned. Later that night, Locke lay on his back, hands folded behind his head, the room dim except for the silver wash of moonlight. Through the slightly open window, the cool air drifted in. He didn't bother to look toward the corner of the room. You've been there long enough. Isn't it time you showed yourself? A moment of silence. Then a low chuckle. You caught me. Looks like I'll have to reevaluate how dangerous you are. Kenny Ackerman stepped out from the shadows and casually climbed in through the open window as if entering his own home. Locke smirked. What's wrong? Getting impatient? Kenny closed the window behind him and strolled to the bedside, speaking in a soft but cutting voice. You're the one behind the Titans appearing inside the walls recently, aren't you? Yes, Locke said without hesitation. Kenny's eyes narrowed in satisfaction. Knew it. You really can turn humans into Titans. So, when are you planning to hold up your end of the bargain? His voice trembled, not with fear, but with desire. Since the day he tasted defeat against Yuri Reiss, the craving for Titan power had sunk deep into his bones. He had never once admitted it aloud, not even to himself. But now that Locke had revealed the truth, the hunger surged violently. Locke crossed his arms behind his head again. You'll get what you were promised. But cooperation comes first. Kenny tilted his head. And you're not lying to me? Locke gave him a slow, amused look. What do you think? Kenny's smirk thinned. The price for deceiving me is high. I'll take that into consideration, Locke replied dryly. Now answer me. Where's Rod Reiss? That idiot? Kenny scoffed. Still hiding underground with his family. Hasn't stepped outside once. Locke's gaze sharpened. So he hasn't moved at all. Kenny suddenly paused, eyes widening slightly. You're planning to act soon, aren't you? Very soon, Locke admitted. I just need you to keep the military police and the garrison from interfering. The last thing I need is pointless complications. Kenny let out a bark of laughter. You think those pampered idiots can cause trouble? You're being too cautious. Of course, he was impatient, he wanted the Titan serum. He wanted the power that had escaped him for his entire life. Whether Locke truly intended to give it to him, that was a question for later. Locke saw the calculation behind his eyes and sighed. This isn't a small matter. Caution is necessary. Maybe so, Kenny said. But let's be honest. With the power you and I hold now, and with so many high-ranking officials dead or crippled, we basically own the walls already. He wasn't wrong. Most major leaders had fallen. The survivors were divided, some leaning toward Locke, others toward the Survey Corps, and the rest too frightened to pick a side. The balance of power had already tipped. Locke exhaled slowly. In that case, we move soon. Very soon. Marley won't wait forever, and neither can we. Kenny grinned. That's more like it. The room fell silent. Outside, a cold wind swept through the district, carrying with it the scent of imminent change. Locke stared at the ceiling, mind sharpening into a blade. The time for hesitation was over. The time for action had begun. Chapter 172. For several days in a row, the mainland remained unnervingly calm. No more Titan incidents erupted within the interior, and Locke's unit had fully taken over the defense of the districts housing the nobility, high-ranking officials, and the wealthiest families. The difference was immediately obvious. Where the military police and the garrison had been lax, scattered, or terrified, Locke's soldiers stood like iron statues, disciplined, sharp-eyed, and radiating a killing intent that made even veteran officers straighten unconsciously. To the elites, these soldiers were a blessing they didn't deserve. To the civilians, Locke himself had become something beyond a commander. He had become a symbol, someone whose mere presence caused Titans to vanish, someone who could bring peace simply by standing in the same district. Of course, that reputation didn't appear overnight. Locke's long track record of slaying Titans, the victories he'd led, and his steady, calculated influence among the public had created that image. His subordinates quietly amplified it through the flow of information and public sentiment. The surface looked peaceful. Underneath, turbulence simmered. Deep within the Reiss family's hidden cavern, Rod Reiss lounged on his high seat, his gaze flicking between Locke and the restrained form of Dina Fritz's mindless Titan lying nearby. He looked both fascinated and unsettled. Although he had ruled behind the scenes for years and knew the secrets of Titan power, he had rarely seen a Titan so close. "You performed admirably," Rod said with satisfaction. Locke bowed his head modestly. "Just my duty." "Don't be modest," Rod chuckled. "You truly are exceptional." Then his expression sharpened. "Have you discovered who was behind the Titan attacks in the interior?" "We have clues." Locke smiled lightly. "But I'm curious, how do you intend to handle those intruders from beyond the walls?" Rod's eyebrows rose. "As expected of you, you understand quickly. Of course, we'll kill them all. Outsiders are not welcome here." Locke's expression didn't change. "And after that?" Rod blinked. "After. Everything continues as it has. I remain behind the curtain. You wield authority on the surface. I won't interfere with you, as long as you don't violate my beliefs." He paused, then added with a cold edge. "And if you insist on opposing me, remember, all your power was granted by me. I can take it back whenever I wish." Murderous intent thickened the air. Rod's meaning could not have been clearer. Locke nodded placidly. "Understood." Rod relaxed. "Good. Then, come meet my family." He called out loudly. Figures emerged from the stone formations behind the cavern, moving in a slow, ritualistic line. At their front walked a young woman with long dark hair and distant eyes. "These are my children," Rod said warmly. But the woman at the front wasn't looking at Rod. Her gaze was fixed entirely on Locke. "You're very ambitious," she murmured. Locke's brow lifted. "Thank you for the compliment." "Frida, enough nonsense," Rod snapped. "Yes, father." Frida's voice was gentle but hollow, her expression dazed, as if she were half lost in her own mind. Locke understood immediately. So this is the Founding Titan's current host. "I thought I would need to hunt for her," Locke thought, "but it seems fate is saving me the trouble." Frida continued to stare, unreadable. Rod sighed. "Forgive her. She's always been like this." "It's probably a side effect of inheriting the Founding Titan," Locke said quietly. "She hasn't fully succumbed to the vow of non-war." Rod's eyes widened. He shot to his feet. How dare you speak of that?" Locke's voice became ice. "I know exactly what I'm saying. And I've given you every chance. But you're still clinging to your old delusions. I can't allow someone like you to continue ruling Parody." Rod trembled with fury. "You insolent brat, you're courting death." He turned sharply toward Kenny Ackerman. "Kenny! Kill him!" But Kenny didn't move. He just smiled, not kindly, but with mocking amusement. Rod froze. Then realization struck him like lightning. You, traitors! He whirled. Frida! Yes, father, Frida answered in a soft trance. She drew a small blade, lifting it toward her forearm. But a hand seized her wrist. Two crisp cracks echoed. Kenny had dislocated her arm with clinical precision before she could cut herself. Frida didn't scream. She didn't wince. She merely stared blankly, as though pain were a concept far away from her. Sorry, Kenny said lightly. Can't let you shift right now. Behind them, the rest of the Reiss children panicked and rushed toward their sister. Rod didn't hesitate. The moment he saw he couldn't transform Frida in time, he bolted for one of the escape passages. When I get out of here, he shouted over his shoulder, I'll show you what happens to traitors. As the supposed supreme ruler, Rod still had forces he believed he could rely on. Locke watched him flee with a faint sneer. So this is the man ruling Parody. Pathetic. He abandoned his family without a second thought. Kenny approached Locke with Frida held safely by the shoulder. What about them? Kenny jerked his head toward the panicked Reiss children. Want me to clean them up? Frida suddenly looked more present, her fogged eyes clearing just enough to show fear. Please, let them go. They're innocent. Locke studied her for a moment. She was lucid now, barely, but enough to speak with intention. He shook his head slowly. I'm sorry. I can't afford to leave hidden threats behind. Frida's face fell, but Locke continued. But don't worry. I've left your family a spark. Frida froze. Her lips trembled slightly. A spark? Her expression wavered between confusion and understanding, then settled into something complicated, almost grateful. Thank you, she whispered. The cavern echoed with the sound of collapsing loyalties, shifting power, and the quiet beginning of a new era. Chapter 173, gunfire echoed brutally through the cavern. Bang, 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 bang. When the last shot rang out, the floor of the Reiss underground chapel was littered with bodies. The entire Reiss bloodline, save for Frida and the unconscious Rod, lay motionless. Only Petra and Emer stood guard, weapons raised, breath steady despite the harshness of what had just unfolded. Emer, still in the Jaw Titan's massive form, released a low rumble that shook loose dust from the ceiling. Her eyes burned with territorial intensity as she held Rod Reiss dangling helplessly between her claws. Rod's face drained of color. An intelligent Titan, here? And siding with Locke? His mind spun. Had Locke come from outside the walls? Had everything been part of a plan far larger than Rod ever imagined? He had believed he controlled the board. Now he finally understood, he had only ever been a piece. I am the king, Rod screamed inwardly, but no sound came from his trembling lips. Emer's tightened teeth clicked shut inches from him, and he nearly fainted again. Behind her, a set of hurried footsteps approached. Grisha Jaeger, covered in dirt and sweat, burst into the cavern. On his way down, he had passed numerous soldiers, some under Locke's command, others belonging to Kenny Ackerman. Together, they had surrounded the entire estate. When Grisha saw Dina Fritz's mindless Titan chain nearby, he broke into a sprint, eyes blazing. Locke's faint smile did nothing to ease Rod's terror. My king, Locke said lightly, why run? I thought rulers were supposed to stay calm. The smile, soft and almost pleasant, hit Rod like a demon's grin. His legs gave out entirely. TCH, pathetic, Kenny muttered. He looked genuinely disgusted. I worked under this trash. Makes me want to gag. Then he jabbed Locke with an elbow. Well? Let's get on with it. You said I'd finally see how Titan power gets passed on. Locke shook his head calmly. This time, neither I nor you will inherit anything. Petra and Emer exchanged confused glances. Neither understood who the next inheritor would be, but they trusted Locke enough not to question him. The process is bloody, Locke said, voice steady. But necessary. You Ackermans can't inherit the founding titan. You're immune to the vow. You'd break it. So only a true royal can shoulder this burden. His gaze shifted toward Grisha. It's time. Grisha inhaled sharply, his expression twisting, part resolve, part guilt. When his eyes landed on Frida, who lay on the ground with her dislocated arm and blank expression, a flicker of pity crossed his face. But it didn't last. Necessary sacrifices. That was all he could allow himself to see. Petra swallowed hard. Something in her eyes trembled, but she remained silent. She had chosen this path, she would face what came with it. Emer tightened her grip around Rod's torso. The bones in his ribcage creaked. Can I kill him? Emer growled through Titan's jaws. I hate his face. Rod shrieked, do you know who I? Let me go! Let me go right now. Still pretending to be king? Kenny scoffed. Buddy, look around. You lost. Locke stepped forward. Enough. He motioned for Emer to release Rod. She dropped him unceremoniously to the ground. Before Rod could crawl away, Locke drove a hard kick straight into his ribs, launching him across the cavern. Rod collided with a stone pillar and slumped, unconscious. We'll deal with him later, Locke said coolly. First, the succession. He gestured at Kenny. Bring Frida. Kenny grinned. My pleasure. He dragged Frida by her unresponsive arm and tossed her beside Dina Fritz like she was a sack of grain. The transformation was immediate. Dina's titan eyes ignited with feral hunger. Even bound, with stumps where her limbs had once been, she lurched forward with a frantic, animalistic desperation. She strained toward Frida, teeth gnashing, the desire to devour overwhelming every other instinct. Kenny stepped back, smirking. Now this is interesting. He glanced at Locke. Don't tell me I gotta turn into a mindless titan first if I want that kind of power? Watch, Locke said. You'll understand. Kenny clicked his tongue. Just how I like it. He lifted his rifle and snapped a shot, so precise that the ropes restraining Dina snapped instantly, one by one. His accuracy was almost inhuman. Locke narrowed his eyes. A demonstration? How childish. Still, Kenny Ackerman was a blade, deadly, useful, and ultimately something Locke believed he could control. And if he couldn't? He would turn Kenny into a pure titan and be done with it. As the final rope broke, Dina surged forward. Frida's fogged eyes flickered. For the first time since arriving, something like fear crossed her face. But it was too late. Dina's jaws clamped down. A wet, tearing sound filled the cavern. Blood sprayed, spattering the stone floor. Petra turned away instantly, gagging. The memory of her own transformation, the horror of being devoured and surviving it, flashed violently through her mind. Emer clenched her fists, jaw tight. Locke didn't look away. Neither did Kenny, his expression twisted into perverse fascination. Grisha shook with anticipation, fists trembling uncontrollably. When Dina swallowed the last of Frida Reiss, the cavern fell eerily silent. Somewhere deep within Dina's titan form, something began to change. Grisha exhaled, shaky, desperate. It's happening. Chapter 173 Part 2. Bang! 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 The deafening roar of gunfire echoed through the underground chapel. When the smoke cleared, only two members of the Reiss family remained, Frida Reiss and Rod Reiss, now cornered by Petra, Rahl, and Emer. Emer's body loomed tall and monstrous, the jaw tightened glinting with predatory menace beneath the flickering torchlight. Rod's throat tightened as he stared up at the sharp-toothed grin that could crush him in a heartbeat. An intelligent titan, here? His mind spun. Why would one of them appear now? Why would this titan side with Locke? Was this man truly one of the people beyond the walls, those mysterious beings the royal family had always feared? Everything he thought he controlled was unraveling before his eyes. He had believed this operation would be precise, predictable, that all threads led back to him. But reality had shattered that illusion. Locke had thrown everything into chaos, and even Kenny Ackerman, once his sharpest blade, now acted of his own accord. Why are they doing this to me? I am their king! The words remained trapped in Rod's throat. His trembling body betrayed his fear as Emer's titan hand gripped him effortlessly and began walking toward Locke. From the stairwell at the far end, Grisha Yeager emerged, his coat covered in soot and blood, his eyes fixed on the scene ahead. The manor above had fallen completely under Locke's control. Kenny's men and Locke's own soldiers surrounded every exit. And there, in the dim chamber below the chapel, stood Dina Fritz, restrained and trembling, her eyes wide with the desperate hunger of an incomplete titan form. Grisha's steps quickened. He knew what was about to happen. Locke turned toward the captured king and smiled faintly. Running away, Your Majesty? The tone was polite, but the smile, that cold, knowing curve, struck Rod like a blade. To him, Locke's grin was not human. It was the smirk of a devil. From behind, Kenny snorted in disgust. What a pathetic sight. Can't believe I wasted years protecting trash like this. He rested his gun on his shoulder, expression dripping with contempt. So, he muttered, are we finally gonna see how this little titan power transfer works? Locke glanced his way, calm as ever. Not us, not you. Someone else will inherit the founding titan's power today. That caught everyone off guard. Kenny's brows furrowed. And who the hell would that be? Even Petra and Emer exchanged uncertain looks. They had trusted Locke's judgment without question, but now unease rippled between them. Locke's tone dropped to something grave, almost heavy. Those bound by the king's vow can never act freely. So the only way forward is to let another bearer, one with royal blood, carry the true responsibility of that heritage. His eyes shifted to Grisha. It's time. Grisha nodded, though the weight of what was about to occur pressed down on him like lead. His gaze lingered on Frida, the young woman who, moments ago, had wielded the founding titan's power, now broken and dazed. There was pity in his eyes, fleeting but real. He knew what had to be done. To move forward, to break the chains of the king's ideology, the founding titan had to be passed on, no matter the cost. Petra's stomach churned. The floor beneath her boots was slick with blood, the corpses of soldiers and servants strewn about like discarded dolls. She clenched her fists and averted her eyes. Necessary sacrifices. That was what she told herself. It didn't help. Rod Reiss, meanwhile, began to shake violently, his terror twisting into fury. What are you planning? Emer, still in titan form, squeezed him between her claws. The crunch of bone and the scream that followed echoed through the hall. Can I kill him now? She growled, voice reverberating from the titan's throat. You dare! Do you know who I am? Rod bellowed, voice cracking between agony and arrogance. Unhand me, you filthy! Kenny let out a bark of laughter. Still playing king, huh? Look around you, Rod. You're not ruling anything anymore. Locke exhaled, almost in disappointment. Pathetic. He gave Emer a signal. The titan released Rod, who collapsed to the floor wheezing. Locke stepped forward, and with one fluid kick, sent the man flying into a stone pillar. The impact cracked the bone. Rod slumped unconscious. We'll deal with him later, Locke said calmly. For now, we finish what we came for. He nodded toward Frida. Bring her to Dina. Kenny grinned. Now this, I gotta see. He dragged Frida by the arm, ignoring her weak resistance, and tossed her in front of Dina Fritz like a butcher presenting meat to a starving beast. The air grew thick with dread. Dina's body trembled. Even without her limbs, she crawled forward, inch by inch, drawn by the instinctive hunger that burned inside all titans. Her blank eyes flickered with recognition and bloodlust. Dina! Grisha murmured. But it was too late. With a wet, guttural sound, Dina lunged. Frida's scream lasted less than a second before it was swallowed whole. Blood splattered the stone floor, seeping into the cracks like dark ink. Petra turned away, hand over her mouth, trembling. Emer shut her tightened eyes, jaw tightening in disgust. Locke said nothing. His face was unreadable. He remembered the stories, how Titan power was transferred, how countless times throughout history one human devoured another for the sake of strength. It was barbaric, and yet, it was the world they lived in. Petra couldn't hold it anymore. She leaned against the wall and vomited. Her mind flashed back to her own transformation, the blood, the pain, the moment when she herself had taken a life to survive. That same hunger, the same madness. Emer reached out her tightened hand to steady her, silent. Kenny, on the other hand, looked almost euphoric. "Well, damn," he said with a twisted smile. "That's one hell of a family reunion." Locke gave him a sidelong glance. "You really are disturbed, you know that?" "Takes one to know one," Kenny shot back, grinning. The sound of chewing faded. Then Dina froze, her form convulsing, light flaring from her body. A burst of steam filled the room. The stone floor cracked beneath her as her body began to transform. Grisha stepped back, shielding his eyes from the brightness. When it cleared, Dina stood tall, human again, trembling, gasping, but her eyes now glowed faintly with power. The power of the founding Titan. Locke's expression softened slightly. He stepped forward and placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's done." Dina blinked, confusion and horror warring on her face. "Grisha, what have we done?" Grisha's voice cracked. "What we must." For a moment, silence fell. Only the faint hiss of dissipating steam filled the air. Then Kenny broke it with a chuckle. "So, what now, Commander? You got your Titan Queen. You planning to start your own kingdom or something?" Locke ignored the sarcasm. He looked to Grisha and Dina, then to Petra and Emer, his allies, his witnesses, and finally back toward the unconscious Rod Reiss. "No kingdoms," he said quietly. "Just freedom. For everyone." His words hung in the air, heavy, dangerous, almost sacrilegious. Even Kenny seemed momentarily subdued. Petra straightened, wiping the blood from her mouth. Emer's tightened body began to shrink, steam rising as she returned to human form beside her. Grisha closed his eyes. He could feel it, the pulse of the founding Titan's power awakening once more in Dina's blood. The old order was dead. And with it, the false king's reign had ended. Rod Reiss groaned, slowly regaining consciousness. His vision swam, catching glimpses of Dina's towering form and the shattered remnants of the chapel around him. "No, this can't be." Locke turned his gaze on him, cold and final. "It's over, Rod. The world you built on lies is gone." Rod's eyes filled with terror. You'll destroy everything." "No," Locke said, stepping closer, voice almost a whisper. "We'll rebuild it. Without walls built on deceit." He drew his blade, the steel reflecting the torchlight, and raised it. "The Age of Kings ends tonight." The blade flashed. And the chamber fell silent once more. Chapter 174, the transformation ended as quickly as it began. The vapor hissed and curled around the ruined chapel, thick and white, until the 10-meter Titan form had completely dissolved into steam. From its fading silhouette, a slender figure emerged, Dina Fritz, her human form fragile and trembling beneath the torchlight. The air still carried the sharp, metallic scent of blood. Grisha Jaeger, who had been waiting all this time with his heart pounding, froze for an instant, then rushed forward. "Dina!" For over a decade, he had carried the weight of her absence, the guilt of their separation, and the agony of believing she was lost forever. Now, seeing her again, alive, human, his composure shattered. Tears welled in his eyes, and his voice broke with every breath. You're really back." Locke watched silently. The flicker of the torches reflected in his eyes, calm yet unreadable. Somewhere in his mind, a stray thought surfaced, distant, detached. "I wonder what Aunt Carla would think if she saw this." Beside him, Kenny Ackerman stood motionless for a moment, his usual smirk replaced by genuine awe. His eyes darted between Dina's trembling figure and the dissipating steam of her tightened form. "So that's how it works," he muttered, voice low and fascinated. "Unbelievable. Truly magical." He turned toward Locke, lips curling into a half-smile. "That woman, she was the Titan just now, wasn't she? After devouring Frida Reiss, she inherited her power." Locke nodded once. "That's right. The founding Titan's power is hers now. Simple and brutal." Kenny let out a low whistle. "Simple? No. It's fascinating. A power that passes through flesh and blood, savage and divine at the same time." Then, his tone shifted, his gaze sharpening like a blade. "But now that I've held up my end of the deal, it's time for you to keep yours, isn't it?" Locke's expression didn't change. "Sorry," he said evenly. "That isn't possible yet." Kenny's face hardened. The spark of menace flared instantly behind his eyes as he drew his revolver, the muzzle snapping up to meet Locke's forehead. "I hope you'll reconsider." The metallic click echoed in the chamber, sharp and cold. Petra stepped forward instinctively, blades drawn. "Put it down, Kenny." Emer's jaw tightened, glared down from above, claws flexing. Her growl rumbled through the air, low, animalistic, ready to strike. But Locke didn't move. He didn't even blink. His eyes locked on the barrel of Kenny's gun, unwavering. "How boring," he murmured. Kenny frowned, uncertainty flashing across his face for the briefest moment. Then, slowly, he lowered his weapon. "You really don't scare easily, do you?" he muttered, holstering the pistol with a click. His eyes drifted toward Grisha and Dina. She had collapsed into Grisha's arms, breathing weakly but alive, her transformation complete. Kenny's voice dropped to a whisper. "When will it be my turn?" Locke folded his arms. "When an intelligent Titan appears again, and if you can capture one alive, that's when you'll gain the power you want." The words were delivered flatly, without threat or promise. But Kenny understood. He studied Locke's face for a long moment before nodding. "Heh, you've got a strange way of keeping people interested." "Fine. I've waited this long, I can wait a little more. I'll play along with your plan." Locke smiled faintly. "And you're not afraid I might change my mind?" Kenny met his gaze and grinned, that signature Ackerman arrogance creeping back in. "No. I think you're smart enough not to make me your enemy." Locke's smirk widened slightly. "Good answer." For now, their uneasy alliance would hold. It was clear, attacking Kenny would be foolish. He commanded soldiers loyal to him, and more importantly, Locke knew that deep down, the man still carried the faintest, buried bond with Levi. That could prove useful one day. And besides, Parody Island couldn't afford more division. Locke's thoughts darkened. The Reiss family was finished. The supposed royal line had fallen, and Dina, though a descendant of the Fritz bloodline, carried a new, uncertain future within her. If the king's vow still bound her, everything could fall apart again. Would Dina succumb to the same mental collapse that consumed Frida? Would she lose herself to the chains of the founding Titan's will? If so, the consequences would be catastrophic. The Survey Corps, the military police, the garrison, all were watching. Inside the walls, the power vacuum was dangerous. The nobles might resist, the military police could rebel. Even Erwin Smith's faith was not unshakable, not after so much blood had been spilled. And beyond the walls, Marley was growing stronger. Locke clenched his jaw. The Eldians enslaved there, weaponized Titans, stripped of freedom, their humanity erased, would one day turn their eyes toward this island. If Parody remained fractured and closed, it would fall. We can't survive divided, he thought. Not anymore. Kenny's voice broke his train of thought. I'll be watching, Locke. Let's see how far your little revolution goes. Don't make me regret betting on you. He turned to leave, his coat sweeping through the blood-stained dust. But Locke's curiosity sparked one last question. Kenny, your parents. Were they Eldians? The older man stopped mid-step, glancing over his shoulder. His grin returned, wide and proud. Nope. I'm a pure Ackerman, through and through. Why? That a problem? Locke hesitated, then shook his head. No. Just curious. He didn't tell him the truth, that only those of Eldian blood could inherit the power of a Titan. Kenny could never transform. So that's it. Locke realized. That's why he later gave the serum to Levi. Everything connected now, the fragments of choices and consequences that shaped the Ackerman line's fate. But there was no time to dwell. Grisha approached, holding Dina carefully in his arms. Her breathing was shallow, but stable. Locke, he said urgently, the medical facilities here are useless. We need to move her. Quickly. Locke nodded. Back home? Grisha froze. For a split second, his eyes flickered, guilt flashing through them as he remembered Carla and Aaron waiting for him. Locke saw it instantly. Then we go to the base instead, he said softly. She'll be safe there. Grisha exhaled in relief. Thank you. Locke turned to Kenny. I'll leave the cleanup to you. Take care of Rod Reiss, and erase every trace of what happened here. Kenny adjusted his hat and gave a lazy salute. Don't worry. I don't leave messes behind. I know, Locke replied. He motioned to Petra and Emer. Together, they ascended the cracked staircase toward the surface. Behind them, the underground chamber fell silent except for the hiss of evaporating steam and the slow drip of blood from the stone ceiling. The night above was cold. Moonlight washed over the ruined manor, the forest beyond whispering faintly in the wind. Soldiers loyal to Locke waited in formation, tense but alert. When he emerged, they straightened immediately. Mission complete, he announced. Form up. We're heading back. The column moved swiftly through the woods. Emer, now human again, walked beside Petra, both silent, the weight of what they'd witnessed pressing heavily between them. Grisha followed close behind, still clutching Dina. Her fingers twitched occasionally, as if reaching for something only she could see. By the time they reached the outer checkpoint of the Survey Corps' temporary garrison, the eastern horizon had already begun to pale with dawn. Standing at the gate were Erwin Smith and Captain Levi, waiting. Erwin's expression was unreadable, as always, composed, analytical, but Locke could sense the questions burning behind those calm eyes. Levi's gaze, sharper and colder, flicked between the group, to Grisha, to Dina, to the blood still splattered across Locke's cloak. You're late, Levi said flatly. Locke met his eyes and answered with quiet finality. It's done. Erwin's voice was low but steady. Then we better talk inside. And with that, the gates of the garrison opened, not to safety, but to the uncertain dawn of a new order within the wall. Chapter 175. You're back, said Erwin Smith, his voice carrying both relief and gravity. Locke nodded slightly, his eyes flicking to the man standing just behind Erwin. The older officer straightened under his gaze. Erwin caught the look inside faintly. He came on his own, he explained quietly. It wasn't my idea. But I take it your plan succeeded? Locke's eyes shifted toward the carriage stationed in the courtyard. Soldiers surrounded it in a tight formation, their weapons raised, their faces tense under the pale glow of the lanterns. Erwin followed his gaze, his expression tightening. His heart, which had momentarily eased at Locke's return, clenched again with unease. If Locke had failed tonight, if things had gone even slightly wrong, the consequences would have been catastrophic, not just for him, but for every soldier standing here. The Survey Corps would have been annihilated in a single purge. The truth was brutal. The military police and garrison could barely defend against a single Titan, let alone the growing threats within and beyond the walls. If their fragile unity were shattered now, humanity inside the walls would collapse. Erwin knew all of this. And he had wagered everything, his career, his life, his ideals, on one man. Locke met his eyes and said calmly, "Fortunately, I fulfilled my mission." The words were simple, but to Erwin, they landed like the sound of a lock turning on destiny itself. "Deputy Captain Locke," came another voice, steady, formal, and unmistakable. Darius Sackley, the president of the 3 military branches, stepped forward. His white uniform gleamed under the torchlight. "It seems you've succeeded," Sackley said, studying Locke carefully. Locke's smile thinned. "I wonder," he said, "what exactly does the president mean by that?" Sackley's gaze shifted to the carriage. "Rod Reiss," he said quietly. At once, the surrounding soldiers stiffened. Every hand tightened around a rifle or a blade. The tension was palpable. Even now, Sackley could feel the balance of power had shifted, and not in his favor. A single wrong move, and nearly 100 armed soldiers would cut him down before he took another breath. Locke gestured lightly toward the carriage. "He's inside," he said evenly. "Would you like to see him, Mr. President?" Sackley adjusted his glasses, expression unreadable. "Yes," he said. "I believe I should." Locke raised a hand, signaling 2 soldiers forward. "Escort the president," he said smoothly. The soldiers obeyed, guiding Sackley toward the carriage. He didn't resist. The moment felt too controlled, too deliberate, like a chess move long anticipated by both sides. Locke watched him go, expression calm, but his mind churned. Sackley's silence, his composure, it made Locke uneasy. Before he could dwell on it, Erwin's quiet voice drew him back. "The chamber's ready. Let's talk inside." "This isn't the place for it." Locke gave a small nod. "Agreed." He turned to Levi, standing nearby, arms crossed as always, sharp-eyed and unreadable. "Captain," Locke said, "your uncle and I have been working together." Levi's eyes narrowed slightly. "Yeah," he replied, his tone flat. "I figured." He gave a curt nod. There was no surprise, only a cool, silent understanding. Locke motioned for Petra, Rahl, and Emer to stay behind and keep watch over Rod and Sackley. Meanwhile, Grisha Yeager, still holding the barely conscious Dina Fritz, slipped away toward the inner castle, seeking whatever medical aid could be found. Inside the candlelit strategy chamber, the 3 men sat, Erwin, Levi, and Locke. The air was heavy with unspoken truths. Erwin leaned forward, fingers steepled. "What's next?" he asked directly. Locke considered before answering. "Initially, I plan to seize power outright. With what we have now, soldiers, control, and leverage, we could easily take the government." He paused, his tone lowering. "But after meeting Sackley tonight, I changed my mind." Levi arched a brow. "Oh?" Locke exhaled slowly. "He's cautious, calculating, but not corrupt like the others were. If we can use his authority rather than replace it, we can stabilize the transition. I don't intend to rule. Not yet." Erwin nodded thoughtfully. "You want him to remain the figurehead?" "Exactly," Locke said. "If he agrees to cooperate, I'll let him keep his position and lead the reforms from the front. The public trusts him, or at least fears him. We can use that." Levi crossed his arms. "He'll agree," he said flatly. "If he didn't, he wouldn't be here tonight. He'd already be hiding in the underground." Locke's lips curved slightly. "That makes sense." He knew the place Levi referred to, the old, lawless world beneath the capital, where those who fled the sun went to rot. Sackley had chosen not to run. That meant he still believed cooperation was possible. "Do you think he's trustworthy?" Locke asked quietly. Erwin answered without hesitation. "Yes. If the royal government ever had one man who could be reasoned with, it's Darius Sackley." He met Locke's eyes. "He's pragmatic, like us. And he's willing to stain his hands if it means saving the walls." Locke nodded slowly. "Then we'll keep him where he is. For now." Erwin's expression softened slightly, the faintest flicker of approval. Then let's discuss your next move. Locke smiled faintly. I have a plan, but I'll need your insight, Commander. It's not something I can perfect alone. You'll have it, Erwin said simply. At that moment, the sound of footsteps interrupted them. A knock came at the chamber door. Commander, said a soldier from outside, the President requests to enter. Erwin looked to Locke, who gave a subtle nod. Let him in. The door creaked open. Darius Sackley stepped inside, the faint scent of smoke clinging to his coat. He adjusted his glasses and exhaled, as if shedding the weight of what he'd just seen. Locke rose slightly, smiling. I take it your discussion with Reiss went well? Sackley sighed. He confessed to everything. Or rather, he broke. He has no right to continue leading anyone. Then, with a faint, almost rueful smile, he added, Deputy Captain Locke, you are an exceptional man. Locke tilted his head. And you, Mr. President, are a very perceptive one. They exchanged knowing smiles, neither trusting the other, yet both understanding they needed each other. Sackley's expression sobered as he adjusted his spectacles again. I'll cooperate, he said finally, his tone firm. On one condition, that whatever we build next will not harm this nation or its people. Everything must be for them. Locke straightened, voice calm but resolute. Of course. Everything is for the people. The corners of Sackley's mouth twitched upward in a wry grin. You lie well, Locke. I'll give you that. Maybe even better than me. Locke blinked once, then smirked. I'll take that as a compliment. For a moment, all three, Erwin, Sackley, and Locke, shared a rare silence. Behind every calm word lay a shared understanding. They were building something new on the ashes of deceit. The royal bloodline was broken. The false king's rule had ended. But what came next would demand far more sacrifice. The night stretched on without rest. Reiss was secured. His family line, once the shadow monarchy that ruled from the dark, was finished. To most within the walls, nothing had changed. But those who understood the truth knew the foundations of their world had been quietly rewritten. By dawn, Locke and Erwin stepped out from the secret chamber. The faint golden light of morning spilled across the courtyard, touching the faces of exhausted soldiers who had stood guard through the night. Erwin glanced toward the horizon. His voice was soft but steady. A new day begins. Locke nodded. And with it, a new order. Both men understood the cost of what they had done. And both knew there was no turning back. Chapter 176. Outside the small chamber where Dina Fritz lay, her face pale and drawn, Grisha Jaeger had not slept. He looked haggard, the shadows under his eyes deep from a night of trembling prayer and restless waiting. Locke watched him for a long moment, then stepped forward, voice low with concern. You think she's awake? Grisha shook his head, trying to steady himself. Not yet. Her vital signs are steady now, though. She should wake soon. When Grisha spoke, there was a tiredness that made Locke catch at his chest. For a long time, the man had carried loss and guilt like a second skin. Seeing Dina alive in his arms had loosened that weight for a breath, and then the world forced more burdens on him. Grisha's expression shifted, the anxious pleading about Dina softened into something else, urgency mixed with an appeal. He looked at Locke with a plea that had nothing to do with gratitude. Locke, give her time, he said. Please. She's been through a lot. Let her learn this on her own terms. Locke's voice was steady when he answered. Of course. The power of the founding titan doesn't become an ordinary tool to be used at will. Unless she's forced to, we won't push her to use it. Grisha's thank you was quiet and immediate. Thank you. He bowed his head a fraction, relief leaking through the cracks for the first time that morning. Stay here with her, Locke told him. I'll send Petra to fetch something to eat and have someone inform the base. Don't worry. Grisha nodded, every movement small and thankful. He settled beside the bed, keeping vigil like someone guarding a fragile flame. Locke left the room and, as he crossed the corridor, took inventory of what needed doing. There was no time to waste. Even if Dina recovered, the political aftershocks of last night would ripple through every institution inside the walls. In the sitting room, Petra, Rahl, Emer, and Hrista were gathered, speaking in hushed tones. Petra's relief was obvious when Locke entered. She blinked hard and smiled, as if the simple presence of their leader steadied her like a tether. "You're back," she said. "Thank God." "It's done," Locke answered shortly. He ran a hand along the back of a chair, eyes moving over the faces before him. "Petra, recall every Corps member scattered across the mainland. Have them await deployment instructions. Now." Petra straightened and nodded without hesitation. "Understood." Emer, sitting silent and watchful, said nothing but met Locke's eyes with a steady calm. Hrista, younger than the others and still trying to shake off last night's ghosts, listened with wide, uncertain eyes. "Emer, Hrista, stay here for now," Locke said, looking between them. "It's going to be turbulent. Don't go out unless I tell you." Both women answered in unison. "We'll stay." Their voices were small but resolute. Locke left them with a single nod and walked toward the chamber where Rod Reiss was being held. The manor's underground prison had become, for the moment, a sealed stage for the aftermath. As he approached the secret room, he found Darius Zackley already there, studying the fallen scion of the Reiss line as if inspecting an artifact. Zackley looked up and smiled thinly when Locke entered. "You're back," he said. Locke returned the greeting with a quick, measured tilt of his head. He watched Zackley's eyes for a beat too long. The man's attention was clinical, indifferent on the surface, but there was a hunger behind it. Zackley's face suggested he could reduce a person to components, measure usefulness, and discard the rest. "You're staring," Locke said coolly. "What do you see?" Zackley's gaze flicked back to Rod, and he made a small motion with his fingers, as if sketching the man's silhouette in the air. "He's strangely plain," Zackley answered. "Two eyes, a nose, a mouth, but there's an emptiness. Fix him and he could be art." "Art?" Locke echoed, amused despite himself. He knew the president's tendencies toward aestheticizing the grotesque, a small, private vice Zackley indulged in when the political theater got suffocating. Zackley's lips twitched. "Not a hobby. A curiosity. When the old is gone and the new is being made, those who are no use become material." Locke let the remark pass. This was not the time for argument. He steered the conversation toward substance. "Has the message been delivered? Have you sent word, as we discussed?" "Already," Zackley replied. "Men are en route. They'll be where we asked by lightfall." Locke nodded, not telling Zackley that the truth of their new order could be fragile if any of the institutions resisted. "How do you plan to handle the military police and the garrison?" Zackley asked then, voice neutral. "That depends on them," Locke said evenly. "If they choose cooperation, we can move swiftly. If not, we coolly apply pressure until they cannot resist." Zackley's eyes glittered, but he said nothing more. He had seen the night's violence in Rod's blood-splattered coat and Dina's fragile awakening. He knew the stakes. Across the city, inside Walsina, the aftershock of the Titan attack and the Reiss collapse reverberated through the upper echelons. High officials gathered in anxious clusters, some alone, others with a retinue, their faces drawn and whispers low. "Do you know why we've been summoned?" an official asked in a low voice. "I do not," another replied. "But with the tide of Titans behind us for now, I slept better than I have in months." "It's because of Locke," someone said. "Those soldiers, not military police, not garrison, they're different. They've seen Titans in blood. They don't break like our men." A murmur ran through the group. Old alliances had been strained, loyalties tested. Many of them felt an unease the size of a chasm opening under their feet. Near the council hall, Neil Decker of the military police walked alongside Commander Pisces of the garrison corps. Both men scowled. They were not in a celebratory mood. This gathering, larger than any in recent memory, had sapped away the usual chain of command. Everyone who mattered had been summoned, power had been centralized to a place they could not reach. If the Titans attacked now, Decker muttered, we'd be leaderless. The soldiers would have no one to follow. Pisces' jaw tightened. The air tasted of iron and fear. He had been a soldier his entire life, and this premonition chilled him to the bone. Unseen by them, in a nearby safe house, Kenny Ackerman lounged and smoked, watching the city's heart with a predator's calm. A human army member at his side shifted nervously. Captain, the young soldier asked, voice low. What are we to do next? Kenny crushed the cigarette between his fingers, flicking the ember into the street. His eyes were hard, a bright, feral light in them. When they're all inside the hall, he said, voice flat, surround it. Let no one out. The soldier's eyes widened. Yes, Captain. Kenny smiled, something that looked dangerously like delight. It was not cruelty so much as appetite, for order, for the neatness of a plan executed without noise. Back at the manor, Petra and Emer had drawn close, their conversation turning practical and sharp. Petra's hand casually rested on the hilt of her blade, though the weapon had not been drawn. She had watched too much death to be careless. We can't celebrate yet, Emer said in that low voice she used when her thoughts were heavy. Even if Rod's secured, the military police and garrison still outnumber us. Petra's eyes flashed with a stubborn resolve. If it comes to it, Emer and I will step forward. We won't let more people die. The younger woman, Krista, watched them, her features folding into an expression that wanted to be brave but was still raw with fear. I'm not a child anymore, she argued when Emer's gentle rebuke rose like an ocean. I can fight. Emer's glance was soft, almost amused. You still have a lot to learn, she said, not unkindly. But you'll be ready. We'll make sure of it. Locke's return from the holding cell was quiet. He had a list of orders in his head now, priorities sliding into place like pieces on a board. They were not yet in the open, but the move had been made. The Reiss family had fallen, and a vacuum yawned where their shadow monarchy had once ruled. It would be filled, or it would swallow them all. As dawn edged thinly across the world beyond the walls, Locke felt the weight of that truth settle on his shoulders like armor. The city still slept in the fragile pause between two storms. Inside that pause, men and women would decide whether to cling to old lies, or to step, however shakily, toward a new order. He allowed himself a small, steadying breath and turned to the faces around him, to Petra, to Emer, to Vrista, to Grisha sleeping now at Dina's bedside, and found, in that ragged group, the thing that would carry them, stubbornness, loyalty, and the willingness to do what had to be done. No one would walk this dawn unscarred. But some wounds could be healed. Some foundations could be remade. Locke looked once more toward the city and then down the corridor, where the secret rooms held the sleeping and the captured alike. Orders were already forming on his tongue, names of messengers and rendezvous points, contingencies, and a single, unavoidable truth: they had to act quickly, decisively, and together, before the old world stitched itself back together. Outside, the city awoke. The first birds, impossibly brave, began to sing. Inside, plans shifted and alliances bent like tempered steel testing its strength. The next move would determine everything. Chapter 177. As the morning sun crested the top of Walsina, the Grand Council Hall slowly filled with bodies, far more than usual. The space, once cavernous and echoing, was packed with nobles, commanders, administrators, and every surviving captain-level official from the three branches. The deaths of many top-level aristocrats and ministers had left holes in the hierarchy, holes that were now masked by the sheer volume of personnel summoned. The atmosphere was thick. Too thick. Nile Doak, head of the military police, shifted uneasily as he crossed the hall with Commander Pixis beside him. He leaned close, whispering under his breath, "Commander, doesn't something feel off to you?" Pixis, ever composed, stroked his chin. "If it is a blessing, worrying does no good. And if it is a disaster, we cannot avoid it by trembling." His tone was calm, almost flippant, but his eyes scanned the hall with a sharp, restless vigilance that betrayed the truth. Others in the chamber felt it too. A strange pressure, like the air before lightning strikes. Even though everyone spoke in lowered voices, the entire hall felt on edge, nerves stretched tight as bowstrings. Something was coming. Everyone knew it. No one knew what. That made it worse. Elsewhere in the same building, Locke arrived, but he did not attempt to enter the council hall. Instead, he climbed directly to the top floor, where the true meeting would take place. Inside the room, Erwin Smith, Levi Ackerman, and Darius Sackley were already present. The so-called king, the puppet monarch placed on the throne generations ago, stood awkwardly near the corner, his regal facade stripped away. There was no majesty in him now. His eyes were vacant. His shoulders hunched. A trembling leaf, no more. Locke stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "Is it handled?" he asked calmly. Erwin nodded. Yes. There was no reason for him to refuse. Only Pixis and the two remaining ministers were aware of Rod Reiss's true identity. As long as those three keep silent, the public will have nothing to question. Sackley's glasses glinted. "You needn't worry about Pixis," he said. "He's practical. He won't fight the tide." As for Niall, Sackley shrugged almost lazily. "If he becomes troublesome, apply pressure. His family is an easy point. But personally, I'd prefer he resign willingly, saves us future complications." Niall Doak and Pixis had long wielded real authority in their respective corps. Their personal networks reached deep into the walls. Confrontation with either man could be done. Locke had the strength and manpower, but it would create too much noise. Too much resentment. Too many scars on the newborn order. Locke understood this. He nodded. "I'll leave Pixis to your judgment. As for Niall..." Erwin stepped forward. "I'll handle him." Locke raised a brow, and Erwin added, "Niall and I are classmates. I'd rather speak to him before forcing his hand." Locke accepted this without argument. He wasn't here to micromanage every relationship inside the walls. And unlike the true royal family, he did not crave the throne. "As long as they don't obstruct the reforms," Locke said, "I don't care who sits where." Everything he was doing, all the scheming, the political traps, the military pressure, had one purpose. Survival. Survival for the island. Survival for the people. A future where their world wasn't determined by Marley's rifles or Titans on the horizon. Erwin seemed relieved by Locke's flexibility. He nodded to Sackley, and together they prepared to leave the room, ready to confront Niall Doak and Pixis before the official council began. Their opinions must be aligned before anything else happens. When the two of them stepped out, Levi remained. His sharp gray eyes rested briefly on Locke, assessing him with an interest he rarely showed. Locke opened his mouth to speak, but Levi beat him to it. "Kenny's out there, isn't he?" Locke chuckled softly. "Do you want to see him?" Levi shook his head. "No. Just asking." But Locke caught the faint flicker behind Levi's eyes, something unresolved, a tension not even Levi himself could articulate. Family wasn't simple for any Ackerman. "Locke, let it go." His attention shifted to the puppet king. A man who once played the role of monarch and now stood like a frightened clerk. "You know what to do, yes?" Locke said. The puppet king straightened instantly. I understand everything. I won't reveal anything. I'll say exactly what I'm told. Please, have no worries, sir." The lack of dignity was painful to watch. But Locke had no interest in dignity. He cared only for stability. The monarchy would soon be nothing more than a symbol, a relic maintained purely so the public didn't panic at a sudden change. He walked to the tall window overlooking the square below. From here, he saw it all. The anti-human suppression squad is stationed at key choke points. The Survey Corps soldiers are guarding the building's perimeter. And his own 300-man force, loyal, disciplined, battle-tested, forming a silent ring around the grounds. 2 layers of protection. Enough to contain anything that might erupt. Inside the hall, nearly every official with influence or power had already entered. They were, as the phrase went, turtles in a jar, all assembled in one place, unable to slip away. Locke breathed out slowly. This day finally came. For years, Marley had done nothing. No invasion. No bombardment. No assassins crossing the sea. That silence, that uncharacteristic restraint, had given Locke the one thing he needed most. Time. Time to consolidate. Time to prepare. Time to reshape the island's future in secret. He knew it would not last. But every minute counted. His eyes narrowed slightly as he thought of the coming council meeting, of the decisions that would anchor Parody's next era. A cold glint passed through them. "Let's begin," he whispered. Chapter 178. The council hall had never been this full. From the moment the doors opened, high-ranking officials streamed in, nobles, ministers, administrative officers, senior captains from all 3 branches of the military. The deaths of many aristocrats during the recent Titan attack had hollowed out the upper hierarchy, but today's massive turnout filled every space. The room felt tight, heavy, suffocating. On the raised dais, Darius Zackley stood beside the puppet king, his posture rigid and formal. He scanned the hall with an expression that revealed nothing. His gaze lingered briefly on Locke and Erwin Smith, who stood near the rear wall like carved stone. Zackley nodded and stepped forward. "Everyone is present," he announced, voice firm. "I have gathered you to deliver important information." The hall quieted instantly. Zackley paused long enough to ensure every eye was on him. In light of the recent Titan attack, and the deaths of several senior officials, the Crown has decided to increase support to the Survey Corps. A ripple of agreement passed through the hall. No one found the decision strange. After seeing Titans slaughter people in the streets, after hearing walls crack under their weight and feeling death brush their skin, even the fiercest critics of the Survey Corps had been forced to reconsider. The propaganda that had painted the Corps as reckless troublemakers had evaporated the moment Titans appeared in broad daylight. Many officials who once mocked the Survey Corps now silently cursed themselves for their arrogance. And most of that resentment had lashed toward one man. Niall Doak. He had promised the safety of the interior. He had promised his military police would protect the aristocracy. But when the Titans came, they all ran. Still, everyone could tell Zackley wasn't finished. If this announcement were the only purpose of the gathering, there would be no need to summon every captain-level officer on the island. The real matter was coming. Zackley continued, voice steady. However, as the military police brigade and the garrison regiment performed poorly during this crisis, and in accordance with the principle of rewards and punishments, as well as the wishes of their own commanders, leadership positions in both branches will be changed. There it was. The hall tightened like a drawn bowstring. Dozens of eyes snapped toward Niall Doak and Commander Pixis. Though the crowd had no proof, everyone knew something had been said behind closed doors. Niall's face was controlled, his emotions buried. Pixis looked calmer than expected, but his serenity was the kind that came from accepting the inevitable. Zackley pressed on. Effective immediately, Niall Doak is relieved of his position as commander of the military police brigade. A quiet gasp traveled across the hall, but Niall didn't move. His expression remained composed, resigned. Zackley continued. His successor will be the former commander of the Survey Corps, Erwin Smith. Captain Levi Ackerman will serve as deputy commander. Shock exploded through the room. Snatches of whispered conversation crackled like static. Erwin? The military police? Levi, too? That's insane. He'll remake the entire branch in months. They're merging power, I can see it already. No one dared raise their voice. Not when both Erwin and Levi stood in quiet confidence, embodying battlefield authority stronger than any noble's decree. Zackley let the murmurs linger only a moment before moving on. As for Commander Pixis, he looked at Pixis with something like respect, and regret. Commander Pixis has expressed his desire to retire due to age and declining strength. His resignation is accepted. Until new leadership is chosen, operational command of the garrison regiment will temporarily fall under the military police brigade. A stunned hush fell over the crowd. This meant one thing. Erwin now controlled 2 corps at once. Someone dared to raise a question. What of the Survey Corps, then? All eyes turned toward Locke. The Corps' strength was unmatched. Its presence on the battlefield during the Titan attack had saved countless lives. Between Erwin's brilliance, Levi's blade, and Locke's decisive strike against the Reiss family, the Survey Corps had become an unstoppable pillar, morally and militarily. There was no one else suitable. But the idea was still shocking. A 15-year-old leading a full legion? Madness. No, it makes perfect sense. 3 branches unified under a single faction. If they move as one, everything changes. And the king approves this? Zackley lifted a hand for silence. The leadership of the Survey Corps will be temporarily transferred to the deputy commander, Locke, who will act as commander until further notice. This is the king's decree. The puppet king nodded obediently, his acting flawless. Those who understood politics saw through it instantly. The king didn't decree anything. Locke had won. And Erwin. And Levi. And Zackley. A silent agreement had formed between the 4 powers that mattered most, those who could steer the walls without the noble family's interference. The ministers and captains in the hall swallowed their pride in silence. Many didn't like it, but the momentum was undeniable. If they resisted, what would happen? Erwin would crush them with military authority. Levi would silence them with steel. Locke would eliminate them with the ruthlessness of someone who had walked through Titans. And Zackley would watch and smile. No one dared challenge it. Even the confidants of Nile and Pixis watched their former leaders fall silent and chose to follow their example. The reshuffling of power was complete. It had happened in less than 5 minutes. Locke watched the reactions carefully. The hall's fear, obedience, and quiet resentment told him everything he needed to know. Half the people here were useless. Cowards. Leeches fattened by decades of corruption. If these men and women were allowed to keep their positions long-term, Parody would rot from the inside. But he couldn't purge them yet. Too sudden a cut would destabilize everything they had built so far. The foundation needed time to set. Later, when the island was secure, these people would be removed quietly and cleanly. No waste in the new era. For now, Locke simply folded his arms and listened to Zackley transition into the next phase of the assembly, preparations for reform, reorganization of manpower, restructuring supply lines, and the establishment of a united chain of command. Around him, officials nodded vigorously, fearful and eager to prove obedience. Their sycophantic gazes followed him like insects tracking warmth. Locke didn't return a single one. He was already thinking ahead. Thinking about Marley. Thinking about the outside world. Thinking about the future of Parody. And how quickly the fragile order inside the walls could collapse if he made even one mistake. The real war, the true one, had not even begun. Chapter 179, You've achieved your goal, Nile Doak growled, barely containing his anger. Can you let my family go now? Standing beside him, Commander Pixis remained composed, almost too composed. His calmness only deepened Nile's frustration. Locke smiled faintly. We didn't arrest your family. Don't lie to me. Nile snapped, stepping forward and grabbing at Locke's collar. But he never reached it. Locke caught Nile's wrist, pivoted, and with a swift movement threw him over his shoulder. The former military police commander struck the floor hard, breath knocked out of him. Locke looked down at him, voice steady. Watch your behavior. He didn't hate Nile Doak, but he didn't like him either. Nile had been loyal to the false king to the bitter end, blind to reality until the Titans tore down the illusion. Locke wasn't going to punish him for that. But the time for blind, rigid obedience had passed. Damn, you! Niall grunted, forcing himself up, rage clouding his eyes. But before he could lunge again, a hand pressed firmly on his shoulder. Erwin Smith. If you or your family remain within the walls, Erwin said quietly, we can always invite you for tea. So I recommend you avoid doing anything reckless. Niall stared at him as if seeing a stranger. Erwin, have you become this unscrupulous, too? Levi snorted. Unbelievable. This is the commander of the military police? Acting like a child. Erwin didn't react to Niall's accusation. His eyes remained calm. Everything we're doing is for Eldia's future. For freedom. Niall's lip curled. Stop dressing treason up as righteousness. Facts will prove it, Erwin replied. You no longer have the right to decide the course of this island. Spend the rest of your life quietly. He motioned with his hand. 2 guards stepped forward, and Niall, Doak and Pixis were escorted out of the room. Pixis did not utter a single word. But he looked at Locke as he left, a long, deep, unreadable look. It made Locke's jaw tighten. Seeing it, Erwin quickly spoke. I'll monitor them closely. They won't interfere with what we're building. Besides, there are a few men we can still trust. Niall and Pixis are capable. One day, we may need them again. Locke crossed his arms, thinking. Fine. But from now on, we control the military branches. And it's time we start preparing the people inside the walls. Controlled information. Step by step. No shocks. Can they accept it? The topic made everyone sober instantly. Exactly, the most politically experienced of them answered after a long pause. Not all at once. Not too quickly. The people have lived under lies for over a century. Tear it away too suddenly, and chaos will follow. But, for now, we've achieved a staged victory. Erwin added quietly, I only pray Marley gives us time. Marley. Levi muttered, eyes darkening with fury. Ever since he understood the truth, that Titans outside the walls were Eldians weaponized by Marley, Levi's hatred for the nation had turned cold and lethal. Locke spoke next. Right now, neither we nor Marley understands the other. That's good for us. But it won't last. We must reorganize the military immediately and begin preparing expeditions outside the walls. Erwin nodded. That is essential. We can't remain on the defensive forever. We must gather intel, every landing point, every potential outpost outside our shores. Anything Marley might use. His gaze drifted toward the upper floors, toward where Dina Fritz rested. And, do you believe she can truly use the Founding Titan's power? To control the Titans outside? Even Levi, who rarely cared about such things, looked expectant. Zackley leaned forward, expression serious. If she can control Titans, then exploration outside the walls becomes 10 times safer. Resources, farmland, minerals, we could use everything beyond these borders. Titans could even be tools, not threats. The room quieted. Everyone understood the stakes. If Parody remained weak, Marley would crush it someday. If Parody grew strong enough, it could shape its own destiny. Locke exhaled slowly. The Founding Titan is powerful, yes. But Dina will need time. We can't rely solely on her power, or on any Titan power. Our true strength must come from ourselves. That made even Levi nod. That's the truth, Erwin said. Foundations built on borrowed strength collapse eventually. A new beginning. What followed was a long, intense discussion. Logistics, reorganizations, plans to merge intelligence units, centralize command, and ensure the Survey Corps, military police, and garrison could coordinate rather than compete. By midday, the new order of Parody Island was set into motion. While ordinary citizens swept rubble from their homes, rebuilt walls, reopened shops, and enjoyed their first peaceful morning in days, the entire power structure of the walls shifted. Neutrals and conservatives lost their influence overnight. Reformers, Locke's faction, gained dominant control of every branch of the military. The remaining nobles kept their titles but lost their teeth. The puppet king remained a symbol, nothing more. Because Rod Reiss's identity had been hidden for decades, no one among the common people noticed his fall. There was no uproar. No rumors. Just silence. Exactly as Locke intended. Beneath the surface, however, undercurrents surged. Locke, Irwin, Levi, Zackley, and their allies now controlled nearly all military power on the island. The Order of the Walls, long used as political and religious control, was abolished quietly. In its place, a new public education office was established, meant to slowly correct false history and teach people real knowledge, carefully and gradually. The printing mills were restructured. All newspapers were moved under central management to prevent misinformation or panic. Private rumor spreaders and profiteers were removed from circulation. Not propaganda, just stability. Parody was too fragile to allow chaos. The technological artifacts stored in military warehouses, old blueprints, abandoned research, untested weapons, were reactivated. Under Hang Zoe's leadership, a new science corps began evaluating every piece of forgotten tech. Some of it had been suppressed for decades. Some of it was useless. Some could change the island's future. As these reforms began to spread, the walls slowly transformed. The air felt different. The people walked with a little more hope, a little less fear. Shops reopened. Streets filled with chatter again. Even the birds seemed louder. Parody Island, once sunken in gloom, now pulsed with the early signs of renewal, like new buds pushing through the soil after a long winter storm. Locke stepped outside onto the balcony of the top floor, looking over the district as sunlight shimmered across rooftops. This was only the beginning. The real trials, Marley, the outside world, the true war, were still ahead. But for the first time, Parody Island had taken its first step towards standing on its own feet. Chapter 180, This operation cannot afford to fail. Zeke Yeager's voice was low, steady, and edged with authority. His yellow hair glinted under the tense dim lamplight, glasses reflecting the maps spread before him. The fatigue from weeks of war showed on his face, but his gaze remained sharp. The Middle Eastern alliance grows stronger, he continued. They're uniting their armies and pushing us harder than ever. Marley can't stay away from the front lines for long. We must resolve the Parody situation quickly and decisively. Across from him, Reiner Braun shifted uneasily. He looked gaunt, older than his years. The weight of his previous failure still clung to him like a shadow. Zeke! Reiner muttered, voice heavy. Parody isn't weak. We underestimated them last time. We acted without understanding the enemy, and everyone paid for it. He clenched his fists. I was the only one who survived. The silence that followed was full of ghosts. Standing on Zeke's other side was Peak Finger, her expression weary, her posture slouched in her usual half-asleep manner. But beneath the exhaustion, her eyes were razor-sharp. Based on the intelligence Reiner brought back, Peak said quietly, the government inside the walls barely reacted. Even when the outer gate fell, they did nothing. No founding titan. No royal response. It means the king either refused to act, or he's incapable of accessing the founding titan's true power. She paused to catch her breath. Weeks of battle had pushed even her titan endurance to its limits. So the real threat isn't their king, Pete continued. It's the Survey Corps. They're the ones who fight. They're the ones who adapt. If we create enough pure titans, and if Zeke supports us with the Beast Titan, the operation succeeds. Quickly. Reiner swallowed. Peak, we're only supposed to recover the founding titan. We don't need. Peak cut him off, voice firm. Don't be naive, Reiner. War isn't about need. It's about the advantage. Victory. Anything that shortens the battle and saves Marleyan warriors is justified. Reiner opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. He didn't like it, but he accepted it. Zeke straightened, voice decisive. Then we follow Peak's plan. He turned toward her, concern flickering across his face. Peak, you just returned from a month-long campaign. You shifted forms repeatedly. You need rest. At least a day. Peak nodded weakly. If possible, yes. I won't be able to maintain my Titan for long otherwise. One day is enough. Neither Zeke nor Reiner objected. Their infiltration of Parody Island's heart, its central district, would be treacherous. Pure Titans roamed the wilderness between Wall Maria's ruins and the inner territory. Peak's card Titan was essential. Without her strength, they would never reach the target alive. The plan was set. The warriors would move again. Parody Island, inside the walls. Locke knew nothing of the warriors' preparations far across the sea. His world was full, too full, with the enormous weight of rebuilding a fractured island. At the Survey Corps headquarters, pigeon deliveries, messengers, and reports had been piling up faster than he could read them. For the first time since taking the mantle, he understood the burden Erwin had carried for years. The Survey Corps possessed unrivaled combat strength, but its administrative backbone was thin. Too thin. And after Erwin took a contingent of officers to seize control of the military police, Locke was left with even fewer hands. So he made a difficult decision. He dissolved his own 300-man elite squad, reinforcing the Corps with trained, disciplined soldiers who could stabilize internal operations. Only 50 remained as his personal guard, everyone else was reassigned across headquarters. For the first time in history, the Survey Corps felt organized. Hang Zoe, though still officially a Corps member, had been transferred into the newly formed Science and Research Division, leading researchers, craftsmen, and engineers in reviving the sealed technologies hidden deep in the military warehouses. Some were incomplete. Some were dangerous. Some were leaps beyond anything the island currently produced. Under Hang's guidance, everything was being repaired, redesigned, and tested for future military and civilian use. Technological advancement had become a top priority. So had agriculture. Zackley was overwhelmed, reorganizing farms, assigning manpower, restoring irrigation, improving crop yields, and training new civil officials. But he worked tirelessly, burdened yet strangely joyful. For the first time in decades, the island was moving toward progress, not stagnation. And for the first time in years, Zackley felt hope. The castle, Dina Fritz's recovery. When Locke finished his work that day, instead of returning home, he walked toward the fortress where Dina Fritz was housed. She had awakened several days earlier. With Grisha's support and Locke's explanations, Dina had gradually accepted her circumstances, the truth about Parody, her regained humanity, and the fight for Eldian survival. She didn't resist her destiny. She embraced it. Locke knocked on the door. "Come in," a voice answered. Inside, Grisha and Dina stood beside the bed, speaking quietly. Both turned when Locke entered. "You're here," Grisha said warmly. Dina smiled gently. "Hello, Locke." "Hello." Locke returned the gesture, though their bond was still new, unlike the years he'd spent with Aaron and Carla. "Dina's body has fully recovered," Grisha said excitedly. "We can begin training. She's ready." He looked as if he could already see the future, a free Eldia rising from the ashes. Dina did not object. She nodded, her expression firm. "I can undergo Titan transformation training anytime," she said. "I'm ready." Locke felt a pang of guilt. "Aunt Dina, I'm not forcing you. But right now, we have no other choice." Dina's gentle smile softened the room. "Don't apologize," she said. "For the Eldian race, for our freedom. I'm willing to give everything." Locke held her gaze, respected her resolve, and nodded. "In that case," he said quietly, "I'll make arrangements." Dina nodded back, resolute. Her training, and Parody's new future, would begin soon. That's the end of this tale for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in part 10. Peace.